Okay, the time
Correct,
is,
as has been said.
thank you so much, Ms. Atlian. The time is now 5:12 p.m. and it is February 13, 2024. The Policy and Governance Committee will come to order. I want to start by welcoming and opening remarks. So good evening and welcome to the February 13, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting. I'm Jonathan Briggs, Chair of the Policy and Governance Committee meeting and member of the board. It brings me a great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting, and I look forward to our work tonight. We will now have introductions of our committee members, starting with board members, followed by administration staff, then board staff, and then the board legal counsel. So I have introduced myself and I'm going to pass it to our vice chair, who will then pass it to the next board member.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Rain Rivera Forbes, and I have the amazing opportunity to serve as the 43rd student member of the Prince George's County Board of Education. And I also serve as vice chair to the Policy and Governance Committee, which I'm extremely proud of. And I'm going to be passing it on to board member Dr. Miller.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Rain. Good to see you back. Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Good to see you back. I'm Juanita Miller, as Rain indicated, and look forward to working with the committee today. We've got a lot on our agenda, especially now that we're in the legislative session and working through some tough bills. But I know that we can work with the legislators to bring some of our goals for our board into fruition.
Good evening. My name is Judy McInnes Murray. I'm an ex officio member of this committee and chair of the board.
I think we'll go to board office staff.
Good evening, I'm Ravel D. Fitzpatrick. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the director for the board office.
Hi, everyone. Cindy Adlen, Administrative Secretary to the Board Office.
Good evening. I'm Robin Welsh, Director of Government Relations, Compliance, and Procedures.
Good evening, everyone. Dennis Whitley III, partner at the law firm of Shipley and Horn, and we are board counsel.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for the introductions. And we're very, very grateful to have anyone who's tuning in. We can't hear you if you're speaking, but we're happy to invite you into this meeting this evening. So we're going to move on to item 1.3, adoption of the meeting agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the February 13, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda as amended?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second?
I second.
It is moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The February 13, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda is adopted and amended. We're going to move on to item 1.4, approval of the committee meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the January 30th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. You said the minutes, the agenda was adopted and amended. What was the amendment? I wasn't aware of that.
As amended.
That's why I want to know what was amended.
We didn't have any amendments to it, but if there were any, then we would just, I think it's just extra boilerplate.
No, it's not extra because it indicates that something was done. So I'd like for you to retract the amended part and just indicated that the agenda for this evening has been adopted. To say and amended, I'm not sure what do you mean, what was amended? Because there was no motion to amend the agenda.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Miller. We're gonna turn it to Cindy, who can share more. So you have your hand in there really quickly.
Yeah, we removed agenda item, I think, oops, sorry. Agenda item 5.8, non-discrimination policy.
I see. Okay, well, then I had that wrong too. So I appreciate the clarification, and hopefully that answers the question, Dr. Miller.
Not quite. Let me just ask, why was it removed and who removed it?
So I requested that it would be removed because Office of General Counsel, who did a review on it, wanted to have, they have a new attorney who specializes in discrimination law. And they wanted to also have their attorney have the opportunity to review it. So their attorney's reviewing right now.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's all I needed to know. But when you talk about something amended, that was not brought to our attention and we did not vote on it and it wasn't brought, done during this meeting.
Yes.
So with that, with that explanation being on record, I will accept the agenda being adopted as amended.
well, we appreciate it, and I appreciate you calling that out. And just to say that I know we've had conversations about OGC, the Office of General Counsel, being backed up. So good call, and we will make sure that everyone's aware of that in the future. So we're going to proceed to item 1.4, approval of the committee meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the January 30th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The January 30th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes are approved. We're going to move on to item 2.0, public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. There is one public registered comment speaker this evening. The registered public comment speakers can be live, pre-recorded, using video and audio, or written. So to the registered speakers, you have been registered to speak in a public comment forum with the Board of Education that will listen to your comments. The board will not address your comments. All registered speakers will have 3 minutes to make their presentations. Registered speakers may not relinquish any part of their speaking time to another registered or unregistered individual. Speakers may not address individuals or issues with profanity or derogatory terms. You will be warned once. If you continue, your comments will be muted and you may be removed from the meeting. Speakers are encouraged to use titles rather than names. For example, principal, CEO, chair, Board of Education, board member, etc. Your adherence to these guidelines will enable the public participation process to move smoothly, and we really appreciate it. We'll now have hear public comments from our speakers on agenda and non-agenda items. And as I mentioned, we have one who I see is in the room. So in a second, I am going to turn over and we're going to have the timer up for Miss Carletta Lillian Lundy, who I had the pleasure of seeing this past Saturday and who is going to share more about Policy 1500. Thanks so much, Ms. Lundy, and the floor is yours.
Right. Oh, do you come off camera or you do not? I'm sorry. You don't have to? Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to? Okay, good. All right. Well, I just will see your face. So welcome. Thank you all for having me this evening. Okay, so I am Carletta Lundy. I am a member of the Parent and Community Advisory Council. And I am here, as the chair said, to talk about Policy 1500. I'm here to really admonish you all to allow PCAC members who would like to serve a consecutive term to do so. And that would be very good for members who are interested in continuing the work that they're doing. And I have suggested this recommendation that each member of the PCAC shall serve for an initial term of 2 years, beginning with the school year in which they are appointed. A member may not serve for more than 2 consecutive terms, which our policy 1500 already allows. Therefore, a member who enters their second term shall continue to serve until a successor is appointed through the prescribed application process. I am of the opinion that a new application should not be initiated unless there is a vacancy, either a vacancy after the second consecutive term, or someone should leave, or unforeseen circumstance. So I am just here to employ this committee to leave the policy as it is without an amendment, to have the existing members whose terms will be expiring to not be able to serve for a consecutive term. I would ask that we would be allowed to do that and not be having to submit a new application once our initial term has expired. Thank you all so much for hearing me and for allowing me to testify this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lundy. We really appreciate you making the time to comment, share your comment. Okay, so that was our one public comment for this evening. But we, of course, welcome the public to submit comments. And I just want to mention that the Parent and Community Advisory Council members were encouraged to sign up and provide comments about the updates of this policy. We have a public comment period for all of our policies. So as you are tracking that, or if there are areas of interest, it really is important that you join us and you share your thoughts because we do take them under consideration and we really appreciate it. We're now going to move on to item 3.0, legislative updates, and specifically MABE legislative committee meeting updates. I will share just a few brief comments and then turn the floor over to Mrs. Welsh if she has any additional pieces from our most recent MABE meeting. So, oh, and just asking that if you are not speaking for the sake of background noise, we really appreciate if you can mute yourself so that we don't have any background noise, please and thank you. So I want to share that MABE had their most recent legislative meeting on Monday, where they shared about a number of different bills. They talked about a laundry list of bills really that are in the General Assembly, some dealing with local funding adequacy under the Blueprint plan, and discussions around the alterations to specific bills concerning that, which Mrs. Welsh can go into more detail about. There was also a bill about a funding approval piece where the school board would need to get approval for a certain percentage of funding, and MABE would like to increase that threshold from the 1%, I believe is the amendment, to 5% before having to ask for approval from the county government. There was another bill that talked about funding requirements under the Blueprint. I don't have all of those listed here, Mrs. Welsh. So I'm actually going to turn it over to you to kind of go into detail about just a few of those bills that they highlighted on Monday. If you have any that are top of mind to share about.
Chair Briggs, just so you know that I did have Cindy post the handout that MABE, so it's on if you want to look at it, if that helps.
Pull it up. That would be very helpful.
That might, and then you might want to talk more about it before. I mean, I'll be glad to fill in, but if there.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, Cindy, thank you. Can you pull that up?
And while she's putting it up, Mr. Chair, I just want to add that MABE did support or does support a couple of issues that support our board, as well as other boards around the state, but one particularly giving us back our authority, more of our authority.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Local control is a big piece of it for all the counties in the state, to ensure that the local boards have more authority over what's happening with their budget and policies.
Correct.
Districts. So thank you so much for that. Cindy, do we have that document that we can share?
Yes, you do. It's on the agenda. I just pulled it up. You put it under actual legislative update.
Okay, there we go. All right, yeah. And now that all makes a lot more sense because I'm like, a bill about something else. So okay. So I'll go back, Ms. Welsh, to your point. So this is SB 1002, which is the bill is the Education Blueprint for Maryland's Future alterations. And particularly they talked about that the bill will pass as the AIB alteration bill. And they were talking about another bill to Blueprint coordinator funding. And so just ensuring that the concerns about state and local funding adequacy are addressed in this. And Mrs. Welsh, again, you are our government affairs person. So as you can imagine, I have not had the time to really thoughtfully look through all of this. And you can provide additional pieces there. Cindy, can you scroll to, let's see, if you can scroll down. I want to go there just to the county one because I think that was a really important one. So you can actually just go up a bit, please, to the first, I think it was to that first page. Yeah. And can you scroll up just a tiny bit more? Okay, yeah, so it's the County Board of Education budgets for notice and transparency. Yes, that one. So HB 115, that bill would include budget processes approved by the county council or made in partnership with the county. And MACo made a 1% standard, and something around if it's more than 1%, that would be the threshold for requiring the county to provide approval for a specific funding provision in the board's budget. To Dr. Miller's point, MAVE is really pushing for more autonomy for school boards. And so they would like to create an amendment where it would be, instead of the 1% threshold, it'd be a 5% minimum before getting approval from the county government to, really, especially because that's not a lot of money, to ensure that we can have a more streamlined and efficient process is what I would say was the discussion. So that was just one that I wanted to flag. Again, Mrs. Welsh, I did not have adequate time to prepare. I really wish I did. Otherwise, I'd kind of go through all of the bills I have here. But I'm going to turn it over to you just to share more about any highlights for our legislative pieces as it pertains to MAPE.
Okay, I'm going to stay right there, Cindy, for a minute, and just piggyback on what Chair Briggs shared about the Transparency and Education Spending Act. Because of the fact that they have this provision in this bill that talks about that the transfer funds from one category to the next being only 1% of that category's amount, that you then, anything above that, you have to go get county approval. MAPE does feel strongly that the bill is also attempting to allow county governments to issue a little bit more control over the Board of Ed's budget. And it's more than just a transparency bill. And MAPE is supporting with amendments and I think partially the support part comes from the fact that you really can't argue with transparency. These are public funds and people do have a right to see what we're spending their money on. But it is a little disconcerting because of the fact that they now want to have an approval, the ability to approve a minimal, very small amount of money, really moving from one category to the next. The next one, let me see, let's go to, let's see. There is one that talks about, if you go down to House Bill 945. Okay, this had to do with initial teacher certification requirements. And this is actually supported by MAPE and is really in line with our with what we talk about in our platform in terms of trying to make it easier to get new teachers and the certification requirements not being so difficult that a lot of times teachers have a difficult time meeting them, especially if they already have a licensure or certification in another state and they aren't able to get reciprocity in Maryland. So this bill really does help all the school systems in terms of trying to get more teachers on board and they meet the certification requirements. It's also critical for us because we live in a state and a county. Our county is like the Tri-County area. We have DC and then we have Virginia and people are coming and going, and we actually get a lot of teachers also like from Pennsylvania. I mean, there's the surrounding states. So the fact that they would be a little bit more lax on this reciprocity would be extremely helpful. The next one is also an important one, House Bill 1175. And this has to do with prohibiting public school employers from entering into certain subcontracting agreements. And where this could be very problematic has to do with right now our school system contracts with a lot of speech pathologists, psychologists, mental health clinicians, occupational therapists, physical therapists. We have a lot of service providers that we can't find them to employ them, so we contract them. And this bill would make it very difficult to move forward and actually really prohibit our ability to be able to do the contracting we need to provide the services, which then would be very problematic, not just because we couldn't provide the services to the students, but because we'd be out of compliance with the law. So this is another important one. And just so you know, if you go to our to the tracking sheet that we have, you won't see a position on some of these. These have just come up this past week. They're brand new. And we have sent fiscal notes out to our divisions, but they have, I think, to the end of this week to get their responses back. So I usually don't like to put a support or oppose until we have information from each of the divisions on what that impact is for them. So, but we thought it's important to share what Mabe has shared. And then, another one that's interesting. So I don't know if you recall last year, and we did not take a position on it, but, because the bill itself was up in the air, and it had to do with, who has the responsibility, in a special education lawsuit that would be responsible for, the burden of proof. And currently the parent has the responsibility for the burden of proof. And last year, the bill had talked about that they would switch that over to the school systems. And of course, one of the concerns had to do with the fact that the cost to the system might be a lot more higher and than it would be if it stays the way it is right now. But in order to help parents, because part of the issue also is, if you're a parent that doesn't have money, then it's sometimes very difficult to get legal assistance to be able to pursue a case against the school system when you feel like your child is not receiving the services they should receive. So this bill is providing a funding source to begin this process of accessing attorneys, advocates, and consultants for the special education programs. And Mabe does support this with amendments. And just so you know, we have a meeting, there's a meeting scheduled, I want to say early Friday morning. OGC will be involved, and several of the special education attorneys across the state to really have a better conversation about this bill. And this has also gone to Trinell Bowman to get her input. So when we have that information back, we will go through it. Let me just see if there's anything else that just hits me in the face real quick. Oh, the other one, if you go to the last page of this document, Cindy, there's the Freedom to Read Act. And this one is problematic in the sense that it does talk about standards for the state library board and state library agency and everything, and resource centers that they put out there. And Mabe certainly supports statewide standards. They're not against that. But what they want to do is they really want to apply those statewide standards that are state library standards to our public education media centers and libraries. And that's where that's why Mabe is offering an amendment to this, because we as a school system don't want to have to follow the rules of the state library board. With MSD, that's a different thing. If Maryland State Department of Education or Maryland State Board of Education says these are the rules you're going to follow, that's fine. But another agency telling education is not that good for us. So they are writing an amendment to see if they can change it. They can have their standards, but don't make us have to submit to those standards.
Yeah, and I think just Mrs. Welsh, I'm not sure if you want to add in there was a piece around collective bargaining, and there's definitely a strong pushback from Mabe around anything that's kind of interceding collective bargaining requirements.
Was that on that same bill?
I think it was on there. I think it was like two parts of that bill. It was one around collective bargaining. So don't
okay.
support that part, but they do support, obviously, there being standards with choice. So state library can provide those standards, but then school districts can choose. Just wanted to flag that. If you don't have it, that's fine.
No, I'm glad you caught it. I didn't pick that up, so that's good.
Okay. So we can move on to item 3.2, blueprint implementation update. There's nothing that I have to share unless Mrs. Welsh, you have something?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. And then I think I really appreciated you mentioning this tracker that we have with all of the bills. And Cynthia, I'm not sure if you have that easily accessible or not. If you don't, then it is completely fine. But if you do, we would love it just for, our public and also all of our peers here to see, colleagues to see if they haven't seen it. And this may be helpful for Mrs. Welsh as we talk through just high level a few of the bills.
So Chair Briggs, this was Shelby's idea, and I think it was a good idea, because if you look at the tracker, there's millions of first of all, there's millions of bills now. We're up to, I don't know, 1,000 and some bills that have come through. They're educational bills that we're not even getting fiscal notes. So we're just posting the bill, but we don't, we're constantly trying to read and catch up with this, stay on top of them. But we also have all our information about when we get a request for a fiscal note and when it's sent to the division and when we get it back, when do we send it, all those things. So to make it easy for everyone, Shelby went ahead and she put together, and if Cindy, would you mind putting it up it's a statement that it's only 2 pages, but what it does, it lists out all the bills that on our tractor we say we support, all the bills that we support with amendments, all the bills that we oppose, and those that we don't have a position on right now. And then we did include also some bills that that I think would be very important for the Board of Education to discuss this evening. So just so I can go, so I'm not sure how you would like to do it. If you just want to ask questions of each one of these, or if you want me just to go through each one, I can give you justification for the supports and oppose and almost all of these. So Chair Briggs, tell me how you would like to proceed.
Yeah, Mrs. Welsh, I think if you can go through the highest leverage, like I know some of those don't impact Prince George's County as much as others. And I know we have like a finite amount of time. So if you want to go through the ones you think are most important, and I do want to flag that I know Vice Chair Walker for the full board had called out HB 0809, this around the student board member. If that's the one there, I just wanted to mention that one too, if you have it, to speak through it.
Yes, I want to discuss that one too.
Okay.
So of course, though, I'll just, some of these I'll go very quickly, but the one, Prince George's, PG 50324, which has to do with the property tax credit. Of course, we support that because what that does, it may attract, teachers to come to the county, to the school system to work, as well as to the, retain employees, because they're actually getting, you know, a tax credit. So that one's where we are definitely in favor of. The next one, House Bill 414, this is like the Maryland Council of Economic Education, and actually it's about them. In the bill, it talks about them funding any professional development, curriculum development, purchase of curriculum around financial literacy. And the reason we did put support is because we have actually received a significant amount of funding from let me see what it is, the Maryland Council of Economic Education, to fund our financial literacy program. Because if you recall, we did make a decision, the board made a decision to add a 0.5 credit as a requirement for financial literacy to graduate. And so, and then we also have another elective under financial literacy. And so this organization has really supported and has been a partner to Prince George's County Public School and has provided excellent funding. So this is just a continuation of the funding. Let's see. The next one has to do with money. So we do, our curriculum does have information about the Holocaust, and there's extensive training in that area when it comes to it within the like history, world culture courses. But this actually provides grant money that would help with either upgrading curriculum or doing professional development. So of course we are appreciative of this. Then if we go to the teacher degree apprenticeship, that opens the door to the possibility of having more teachers to go through our apprenticeship type of program to open the door for them to be able to be teachers. So again, that supports our platform in terms of being able to hire more staff. The next one has to do with equal opportunity for all Marylander Acts. And I did put support because we actually, if you go through and look at all our policies, we have a lot of policies that address anti-discrimination. And so this really is right in line with where the school system is and the Board of Education is on that topic. And the next one, again, is SB 441, the school nurses, that is the opportunity for nurses to get some of their school education paid for in nursing. Again, it just opens the door to possibly being able to attract more nurses to come to work for Prince George's County. That's always a major area. In terms of getting, there's always shortages for nurses, so that would be extremely important. The next one, if you scroll down, Cindy, the one on economic development, Maryland Aerospace and Technology. So we we have created a the Maryland Aerospace and Technology Zone is to provide educational opportunities. And since we do have an education, aerospace engineering, aviation technology program, the staff and curriculum felt that this was would be extremely helpful for the school system, because it would create this economy of collaborative, and which then the superintendent would also be a member of it, and it could be assist in the advising of the larger commission and the activities and potential partnerships for us. So we thought that was very beneficial in moving that program forward. The next one, supports with amendments. That one has to, okay, so the high school metal detector, that's a local bill. And of course, we do have high school metal detectors now in all the high schools. And but all of those metal detectors were purchased through grant funds. And we were able to get those. But we didn't have, though, is the funding to be able to hire staff to be able to run the metal detectors. We actually have right now, they have taken many of the safety and security service assistants and pulled them off their tasks that they're supposed to be doing just to be able to run the metal detectors. And that puts us in a compromised situation, especially in light of some of the things the schools are dealing with in safety, because because now they're doing the metal detectors and we don't have those people. So in looking at it, and I did have safety and security services do some calculations for us, and it actually, when you look at the amount of staffing that has been doing the metal detectors and are taken away from their jobs, and if you were to replace those so that they could go back and do their jobs, we'd be looking at about $2,323,276. And that bill, the bill right now says that there would be $100,000 put forward for the funding. So that still leaves us $2,100,000 short. So that's why we say that we would support with amendments, because we are in favor of the metal detectors. And then the next one had to do with this has to do with the income tax credit for employers providing parental engagement leave. And right now, the way that bill reads, it actually says that that not only does the principal have to sign off on this certification form that I think MSD is supposed to create, but then the parent has to take the form to the board member of their district, who would then sign off, and they would certify that the person did the volunteer work. So we felt like that was actually, from an administrative standpoint, burdensome to try. First of all, the principal's not always able to just stop what they're doing and sign off these forms. And we do have Raptor, so we actually are able to track our volunteers. So the issue, that wouldn't be an issue. The issue is we are recommending that they change the language to say principal/designee, and also not have have board members have to fill out the forms, because depending on which school you are representing, what district that school might be in, you'd be amazed at how many volunteers they have, or how many volunteers when they're going on field trips and stuff, how many volunteers there are. And we did not want to inundate board members with a million certification forms when, quite honestly, you wouldn't even know whether or not the person was telling you the truth or not, because you don't have access to the Raptor. I mean, you could, but I don't know that you want to spend your time checking all the Raptor data out to see how many hours they put in. So we felt if they could just say a principal/designee, that would be really beneficial. As far as opposition, many of these you're going to see has to do with curriculum. And there's a lot of bills that have come through that are really mandating curriculum. And at this point, we feel strongly that that is not the and you have it again in your platform that says the curriculum is the responsibility of the school system, the Board of Ed, and the superintendent. And so that is not the responsibility of legislators to dictate curriculum. So that's why we opposed many of these. And then also unfunded mandates, like even the elementary, secondary schools workplace readiness week, that for that particular week and the amount of training that would have to happen within that week and what they're recommending, the cost of putting together, first of all, the training materials that would be needed, and then the professional development for our staff, and you're talking about all grade levels, and there's no money attached to this, so that would be another unfunded mandate. the one on sexually explicit materials prohibited in libraries and media centers, we do oppose that one because we actually have a whole process where we involve our parents are, our community members, as well as our staff. And so whenever we're looking at either instructional material or media materials for the school libraries, the committee comes together and makes decisions on whether or not these materials are acceptable or not. So again, we don't want the legislature to tell us what to do in terms of what should be in our libraries when we are relying on our staff who are very well trained, as well as our community members, our parents and everything, to give us their input for that. As far as the auto injectable House Bill 086, again, it's an unfunded mandate. In the past, the health department, they had grants, so they covered all the cost of the epinephrine injectables, and now they don't. So that's a cost to us. So would be providing all of that as well as the bronchodilators. All of that would be a cost for the school system in addition to any additional training that would need to be done. The next one is a curriculum one. The next one is House Bill 620, again, curriculum unfunded mandate. So House Bill 416 has to do with active shooter safety drills. And we oppose it for several reasons. One is that they're telling us how to do the mandating. How would you go about doing the training? And secondly, they're talking about the types of training. Now there's already in the law how many drills you have to have in a year. And what do you have to practice? Like what types of things? Like, for example, you must have a fire drill every single month of the year, or 8 out of 10 months. But we actually extend it to every month, just because it's just good to be prepared in case there's ever a fire. But also is that in doing these active shooter safety drills, then if any, and we don't do this anyway, but if any students or parent or staff members became upset or something, there goes into extensive requirements as far as training and possibly mental health follow-ups, possibly additional counseling services. And so we felt that and again, it's another unfunded mandate. So that was opposed. The motor vehicle school buses actually would cost us, we currently have 1,251 buses, and it says by 2026 that you would have to put school bus seat belts on our school buses. Even the old ones that we have currently, they're not old, but the ones that we already have. And so that could run anywhere between $25 million to $31 million, so that would be an extreme expense. And, I don't know if anyone saw in the news, the picture in Howard County where that bus turned over. And it makes you wonder about seatbelts in terms of students getting trapped and everything. And I don't know all the details of that accident, but anyway, it is an unfunded mandate. If they want to have that, that's probably something they need to either like gradually require it so the electric school buses actually come with seatbelts. So as we move forward and we get more and more electric buses, things like that have seatbelts, then that would be wise. The next one is House Bill 047, and it has to do with Fairness in Girls Sports Act, and ultimately would require that you do not have any students who are transgender participating in interscholastic athletics of this gender that they prefer. And if you look at our policy, as well as our administrative procedure and the MPSSAA guidelines, we follow strict rules of allowing students who are transgender to be able to participate in the sport that that's their preferred gender. So this actually goes exactly against all of our policy. This next one has to do with requiring financial literacy. And although we have it and we do it, again, it's not the legislature's place to tell us what to do. The same with family life, human sexuality instruction. This next one, House Bill 7730, is about collateral consequences of a criminal conviction. Again, that is a curriculum, and that we do oppose anything that is mandating curriculum. That's in our platform. The next thing is the House Bill 395. This is actually a local bill, and it has to do with where there are pregnant students in our high schools, in which the pregnancy rate is over 1%. That you would have to then provide put in a CTE program for child development, as well as have a basically a before and after care kind of program there, a care program for children. And the cost would be very expensive for us. Just for one school alone, it would be $1,600,000. And if you were to look at opening these, it would be daycare centers basically, and then having your child development CTE, if we were to expand that across the system, depending on where we find our students who are pregnant, it would end up, it would be astronomical cost for us. We do have, just so you know, a very extensive program for students who are pregnant and parenting students, and I want to say 13 some people that go out and support in the schools and ensure that they have all the things that they need. And I did speak with the coordinator of that program, and she shared with me that they're actually pretty proud of their graduation rate, that of all their pregnant and parenting students, recently, the past couple years, it's been up to 97% graduation rate. So, and we do also have a policy that talks about pregnant and parenting students. I can't not talk today for some reason. Anyway, pregnant and parenting students, as well as we have an administrative procedure that goes into detail what needs to be done to support these students. Let me see, I'll go quickly. I don't want to.
Robin, what was that number again?
That was which one was that? House Bill 395.
Yeah, you want us to wait until you finish, or?
Yeah, can we wait just so that we can get through and then we can ask those questions?
Okay.
I won't say too much more, because a lot of them are just related to this whole issue of curriculum and certification costs. Let me just see if I see anything that sticks
If
out.
you can just, Robin, do that student member bill before
Yes.
before you wrap. Yeah.
So I actually had several that I wanted to bring to your attention. And for some reason, I'm not sure what I did with them. Hold on one second. Maybe on this sheet.
And would you give me the number? Is it up here? I can't see it. For the
student board member, it's Senate Bill 386.
Yeah, it's right there in the underneath bills for discussion.
Do you see it, Board Member Miller?
It's on the screen. It's under bills for discussion,
Yes.
SB 36 county.
Okay. I don't mean to jump the gun, because we do have under discussion the student board member policy also to discuss. But I want to point this out in this bill. The bill actually talks about the fact that if it were to pass, it talks about each of the different counties, but it says for Prince George's County that they could do what they could be able to vote on they could vote on everything except for the dismissal of or other disciplinary actions involving personnel, hearings held under section 6202, which again is certificated people who might be either suspended or terminated, and then appeals to the county board are under section 4-205, and those section 4-205 appeals refer to appeals that address a wide variety of subjects. It really comes down to anything that the superintendent has made a decision, and like for example, let's say it was a decision about transferring in a school, then the parent of that student could, as let's say the superintendent said no, or superintendent's designee said no, you cannot transfer, then the parent could appeal it, and it would be a 4-205 appeal. And I know you have many of those appeals. So that is what they want to change, so that they could vote on anything except for these three areas. we currently, our policy that we're working towards is on collective, says that they can vote on everything except for collective bargaining decisions, teacher and administrative disciplinary matters, and other personnel matters. Now, I will say that in the review of the policy that we have, the OGC brought to our attention, and Dennis and I had a major conversation about this in terms of what, and this comes from House Bill 1079 from last year. Our current policy talks about the fact that the student board member could vote on anything except for collective bargaining decisions, teacher and administrative disciplinary matters under 6202 and other personnel matters. The issue is that if you look at in LexisNexis, which codifies the bills, that LexisNexis is saying that July 1, 2024, that it will change, and instead the student board member would now only not be able to vote on not just on the collective bargaining decisions and teacher administrative matters and other personnel matters. It actually goes back to what it was prior to when before this bill was in place, which in essence says that House Bill 1079 made a change in the rights of the student member to vote for 1 year in increasing the amount, but then it goes back to what it was for July 1, 2024. So our current policy that we're working on would be for this year, and then we'd have to go back in and revise the policy too. Now, the interesting thing is, if you go to the fiscal and policy note, which is, and you go to MGA site and you look it up for House Bill 1079, it actually says the opposite. So there is major confusion on this. So I had conversations with OGC and conversations with Dennis, and Dennis wants to do a little bit more research on this. And so we feel like that this is, if in fact this bill would pass, then of course it would change it again. So we're going to be discussing what we currently have when we get to the discussion point. But for this bill right now, we're looking at the bill is allowing for Prince George's County that the student board member could vote on anything except for the dismissal of other disciplinary actions involving personnel, hearings held under 6202, and appeals of the county board under section 4205. So now we have not put a position there, and in fact, I think I emailed you, Chair Briggs, and then board member Walker, to inform you about this so you were aware of it, but it might be something you'd like to talk about a little bit.
Okay, so board members, I know we have a number of questions, and I think the best way to do this is to kind of acknowledge you based on your hand being raised. And then Cindy, if we can have a 2-minute timer for these questions, I think that'll help us to stay on track. I'm gonna go with board member Rain Rivera Forbes first, and then board member Walker.
Thank you, Chair Briggs. Thank you, Ms. Welsh, for that update. So I did do some more research on this bill that is being sponsored. And the research that I found is that an amendment was recently submitted. And that amendment was to keep the voting rights of all existing SMOBs the same. So this means that the bill will no longer affect a SMOB's voting rights if it's already been put in place. It's mainly specifically for student member of the boards that do not have any voting rights at all.
Oh.
And that, yeah. So that amendment was just put in last week, and it was submitted by Delegate Fair, I believe. So it's definitely on there if you need to look at it. I make sure to double back and do my research on this.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So you can definitely look at that on there. It would not affect the Prince George's County student member of the board now or in the future. And it's going to be up to the Board of Education if they decide to extend the Prince George's County SMOB's voting rights, or in terms of lowering it, according to that bill, if it were to pass, it means you just can't lower it past the state SMOB standards. So as long as it aligns with the state SMOB, it's fine. But if you want to give the SMOB full voting rights, you can do that as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. Board member Walker.
Thank you so much. Ms. Welsh, what an excellent job you did going through, and kudos for everyone who worked on the tracker. I know there were a lot of hands that were in it, and it is really amazing. So as I look at the tracker, the Excel format of the tracker, I can see where our opposition, our holds, our SWAs, and our supports are, but the document you showed today, I don't have access to. If you could just maybe give us access to that document, or I don't know, Mr. Briggs came off. So maybe you have access, Mr. Briggs? You came off.
You actually do have access because it's sitting on the agenda.
On the agenda.
On our-
Oh, not a separate, so it's not like our tracker document. Okay, got it. No worries. That'll just continue to be updated, but maybe it should be so that we could just see all the updates. It looks like it's a weekly document, so it might be good.
Right, as we
Yeah.
go, we keep updating it.
Yeah, if it could be kind of shared, this one,
I think we could. I'll talk to Shelby.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for that. And then what I was thinking, and I know I mentioned it in email as well, is, some of these bills are already in committee. I had the amazing opportunity to listen into the education committee last week. It was really good. But one of the bills came up, and it would be amazing just to have these 3 form letters that it will help you all, it'll help Mr. Briggs and all of us to be able to throw in, not only we support this with the rationale, but we support with amendments, or we oppose this and this is the reason. Some of what I heard today, and the reason why I want to do that is because some of these sound good, like on the outside. It says like supporting, I don't have one in front of me. Here's one, public schools. That's not a good one. Something about public schools. Anyway, the point is financial literacy, and it reads really good, the title. But when you dig deep, it's forcing a mandate on us that we already have. So it would be good just to be able to do that. I want to ask a question in my last 4 seconds of what is our process that we to be able to get information to the bill owner, the bill sponsor, because I think that this is going to be phenomenal to be able to get directly to them.
Sponsor?
Yeah, so for instance, Denny Delegate Denny is sponsoring a bill, and so she was in front of the education committee. But I know that we're opposing that bill for a number of reasons. It will be great to be able to somebody talking to her to give her a heads up on that, and then giving her that letter of opposition, but with the rationale why, in case she wants to modify it.
Yeah, I would just say, Ms. Welsh, feel free to chime in here, but I think like the sponsor, introduces the bill. And then you have the committee that has ownership of that bill once it's introduced. So it sometimes is good to like submit the letter to the committee leadership, because they now have access to it. The sponsors put it together. They've made the request for the bill language. So it really, I think probably it won't be a standard process, because it really depends on who has like the most impact on the bill at the time. But I think to your point, the process we should definitely work on and have that down. Ms. Welsh, Mrs. Welsh, did you want to
follow up discussion? Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Great.
was just going to say that I do know this, that the superintendent also sometimes communicates with a different people who are sponsoring the bill, basically, and it gives feedback on how it might impact the system. And each of you as board members can also certainly give feedback if you just, especially when it's aligning or not aligning with our platform and everything, as well as Shelby. I have written little things for her to read at different, hearings, so that's for when something comes up, as well as she does a lot of behind the scenes conversations with the delegates, just giving them a heads up of, this is going to be that negatively impacts us or whatever. And that, I think, goes a long way in terms of helping to, let the delegates know, where do we stand as a school system on some of these bills.
Precisely. And it shows partnership. Absolutely. We should talk to the sponsor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I think also just for clarification, because I know we were talking about like getting letters out and getting them to people. So I think Mrs. Welsh, to Board Member Walker's point, like getting that process down, because an official letter to a sponsor versus like an official letter to a committee saying we don't support or we oppose this specific thing is very different from like tapping a sponsor and saying, hey, can you, like we have issues with this, I have a relationship with you. And I think those are 2 different approaches, and we can probably support board members. So it's clear, and we're getting to what you're requesting, which is, I think, very different things from how I'm seeing it. But board member, Dr. Miller. So Dr. Miller, if you are there, we are recognizing you for questions, but we can surely come back after the fact. Are there any other questions that folks have about any of the legislation? While being mindful of time, I think we see you moving, Dr. Miller, but we cannot hear you if you're talking. Okay, I think we're going to come back. Yeah, we'll come back to you later.
He's having trouble talking on mute. You just have to lightly tap it and then it'll pop up on your phone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I wanted to go back to HB 395, but before I go back, that's the one on pregnant women. I'd like to follow up on this suggestion of Board Member Walker in reference to this letter. I think it would be effective when we do in the fall, when we start talking about the legislation that's being presented, and as we have initiated the legislative agenda, that would be the ideal time to have letters from the board in terms of their positions on those issues. This year, we gave a global explanation of our positions on specific bills, and that was it. And so when we got into the legislative session, legislators were saying, well, we don't have anything in writing from you all. So I think, at least I believe that's where Board Member Walker is coming from. And I think it's an excellent idea because you want documentation. You can hear one thing, but if there's nothing in writing, there's nothing that you have to support you. And yes, you could talk to the sponsors, but the sponsors of the bills are sponsoring based on the recommendations that others have given them. They don't just come up with the legislation. Someone had to provide it. And so that's the other thing you have to look at. Yes, you do need to talk to the sponsor, but you need to talk to the person who asked the legislator to sponsor the bill. It's not that the legislature or state legislator came up with the bill. Just for instance, we might want to have a bill repealed. I'm trying to think of the one I think that really needs to be repealed. It won't come to me right now. But we will ask the legislator to present that bill for repeal. So again, talking to the sponsor and talking to the actual persons or groups that are requesting that legislation to be presented.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. And then we have one more question, board member.
I didn't finish.
Oh, are you? Well, your time's up. Do you have some more to say? Go second round.
Well, I just want to throw in that we can't support 395 because that, to me, that's a social services, unless we're going to collaborate with the Department of Social Services. That's really deep and very, very expensive. And Ms. Welch said it. Ms. Welch, you did a fantastic, outstanding job reviewing these bills. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay.
Board Member Walker.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to just add in a couple of key pieces. The letter that I was requesting for support or support with amendment or opposition is really to be able to send to the committees. So what I specifically heard asked in multiple committees that I heard I've been listening into are, do you have anything from the school board on their position? And because they can't get to everybody, I think just having a standard letter that we can send to them will be so super important. For instance, this one, and this one specifically around the childcare, although I think they did a good job penetrating, they really, really did. It will really just talk about the key points of why we're not supporting this, because on the letter, it looks good. Like on the topic, it looks really good. It sounds good, but really when you delve deep, or fiscal notes, they did a great job. Now, I haven't been to all committee meetings for the delegation, but I'm assuming that they're doing that. Letters go a long way on support, opposition, and support with amendment, because it gives not only our position, but also leaves room for the partnership that we said we wanted, especially with support with amendment. And that's something that we worked hard to have last time. And so we have it now, the opportunity. And that's why I'm pushing for this letter, which I think we all are saying it feels good. Which we need to get, and I'm happy to work on that subcommittee if needed. The other piece that I was gonna say is it time to talk about the student board member yet? Or no?
If it's about the policy legislation, you can talk about.
Yeah, so just really briefly, I only have 28 seconds, is that I voted, I think it was very unanimous when it went across for the student board member having all voting rights. But I can tell you that as I've had time to really have it executed, is that I do believe that there should be some limitations on the student board member. It has nothing to do with our current student board member. Board member Rain is amazing. It's more about the role and long-term impacts. And so I'm happy to talk my perspective on that. I just don't have time right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so something I think really we're hoping that we can do, I think Mrs. Welsh, and I'm hoping that we can get this done Friday when we have our meeting, is like we've got that tracker, we've got the process, right? And one of the things we need to do is backwards map. If there's a hearing that's coming up on February 28th and we want to get a letter over, we got to start to plan like having the, specific department approve things. And just, I know we can't rush them all the time, but I think if there's something we can do to say, if there's a fiscal note, where are you at on this? Because that's really the holdup. Like the holdup is we want to make sure we're in alignment with them. If they normally can say there's an unintended consequence for this specific reason, they get the nuance there for that particular piece. And then I think that's where we can have those letters drafted and we can really start to star the ones. We're not going to send a letter for everything, but I think if we have a plan, we can just have like a stamp and go process almost. So because I know that it's really hard, and I know we're all like doing a lot of different things, and there's a number of bills. That in itself is a job, just tracking those bills. So we've got to find a way, but we need to have a voice, to you all's point, and I don't think that means that we can't because there's so many bills. So I think we just have to be more strategic. And Mrs. Welsh would love to discuss that. And if you have any points you want to share before we move on,
I would like to just say that that actually the actual letter, that when you asked for a form letter, I was thinking you were also talking about a form letter for the committee. And in fact, that's when I set it up for you, I was going to have it like
Yes, ma'am.
for the committee. But as far as a lot of times personal conversation with a sponsor goes a long way also. But right now we're at the stage where we really need to have the form letters ready for that. And so Shelby is constantly tracking also when the hearings are coming up, and I'm tracking these bills that are coming as far as the once the fiscal notes get in and putting in oppose or support. And just so you know, we had, I want to say at least 40 bills came in on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this past week. So it has been insane trying to get all these bills out to our staff. And of course, our staff, I mean, curriculum keeps getting loads of bills because I don't know, I think the legislators just love wanting to do curriculum. So we have a lot of curricular bills so that we're showing up. But once we get past this stage, the introduction of new bills will come to a stop. And so then we're just talking about all the different committee meetings and hearings coming up, which I think we can absolutely have a plan so that you're ready to go and get letters out to the committees. So, but I do have one more bill. I have a couple that I had up for discussion, but I think the one that I'd really like to have a conversation about is the one on Senate Bill 654. Because we've had several requests about Senate Bill 654 this past week. And even the fiscal policy person and DLS was like, where's your information? Where's your information? And I finally got it today. And I know Chair Mickens-Murray, you also asked about it. And then we had a senator ask the question. And so just so it's pertaining just to Prince George's County. But it turns out that it's that what it's saying, I'm just going to share with you what Liz Faison, who is our Associate Superintendent of Student Services, shared. And I think it's very extremely helpful information for everyone to have, because this is a bill. And when on its face, it's one of those bills that you think, of course we want to do this. This sounds wonderful and everything. But then when you know first of all, when you compare to what's already happening in the school system and then the expense of this, you have to think about it a little bit harder. So what she shared is that right now the school system maintains a student intervention team and student support team for every single school. And it's made up of a referring teacher, principal, assistant principal, professional school counselor, school nurses, school psychologists, pupil personnel workers, and other staff and instructional leadership, like special ed teachers, speech language pathologists, whoever. And they are constantly meeting on different students. So if a student shows any kind of problems, whatever it might be, immediately it goes to these different teams, and they are looking at what the data shows, what any kind of behavioral information they might have, how the students' grades are looking, those kinds of things, and come up oftentimes with interventions and plans. And they also have they work also with the school community coordinators with the on our community schools, and we also have our crisis intervention teachers. And then they also, when a student's really having difficulty, they will refer them to either whether it's academic or behavioral. They will refer them to the school-based management team to plan for broader school focus. They'll look at data, the culture and climate for the student support that's provided. So so the plan that's in the bill is actually mandating what we already have in place, but they basically are then requiring that we pull out from all this data metrics that the system will need to ensure capturing strategies for the student support specialist team to implement on behalf of the school and reporting the results of the plans. This would add an additional layer to a variety of plans that are currently created and require school administration to establish, implement, monitor, and report in high schools. In this particular climate, teacher staffing reductions, administrators and school staff alike are working diligently to ensure the components of instruction, supervision, and existing local, state, and federal mandates. So this bill would impact operations in a way that requires significant time to complete, alongside with all the similar plans that have been required by SIT, SST, SBMT, Comprehensive School and Improvement, which is CSI, and Additional Targeted Support and Improvement Schools, ATSI, the Blueprint, and FOSSA. So there is a million things that are going on right now within our schools. And so she said to be able, first of all, be able to do what the bill's requiring, it would definitely, she would recommend a position probably called the Student Support Specialist, network coordinator, because that's what they are referencing to. And she said that in order to do this, we're looking at, and I just wanted to look at her figures, that we're looking at a cost of, because we have 27 high schools and we'd have one person for each one of these schools to be able to coordinate all these things that are this bill's requiring, that for FY25, we're looking at $4,777,574. And then it gradually goes up because our salary, if you look at how salaries are set and the increase, in terms of time going up steps and cost of living, by 2029, we'd be looking at $6,380,303. So we don't oppose to, I haven't had any conversation on this, but reading through this, I would say that probably we're not opposed to the actual concept of it. It's just that we have so many of the things in place that we're already doing, and then to incur that kind of cost is really, we're not in a position to really be able to fund that. Is just my opinion, only my opinion. So certainly this is the opportunity for all of you to really talk about and decide where you'd like to go with it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I raise my hand. I'm trying to raise my hand.
Okay. I will, I'm just gonna, so now that I know you're in queue, I'm going to go to board member Walker first, and then I'll go to you, Dr. Miller, after.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Robin, and for getting with the right chief of staff in order to talk through this. This is an example, an amazing example of a duplicative bill. It actually happens to be the same senator who I like, who put in for our integrity officer as well, who is also duplicative, and we opposed. This is a prime example because there's a meeting tomorrow in order to vote on this. And the reason why I put that out there and it's so tight is because it is an implication to our, as you said, to our own school system and the redundancy that it introduces, as well as the other fiscal note. So I know we're working on the latter. I know we are, but this is a prime example of us being able to put language, which you already have, by the way, it was excellent, to put language against it to say, hey, listen, we hear you, but these are all the things that we're doing in the school system. And so it's duplicative to the work that we have. And by the way, there's no fiscal note attached to what your bill is proposing to do. And I think that is extreme information that we need to make sure we get in front of people. And the reason that I said that it's important to talk to the legislators that are introducing it is because oftentimes they're just not educated enough on this particular topic. It is a good idea in principle. It's not that he or any other legislator is bad. It's just that they don't know all of the different roles and responsibilities that we have. So because this one, we know is coming tomorrow, and we've been asked a trillion times about it just in the late hours, it might be good to go ahead and put this one on, and I'll leave it to Chair Briggs, but we know this is going in front of the Senate tomorrow. So it would be good to put that blurb that you already have just to help to educate them on exactly what's here. And that right there is why it's opposed. However, in the future, it might be great when we can talk about fiscal notes for the coordinator itself, but this is duplicative, and there's just so many of them out in the system. So I just wanted to add that for perspective for Mr. Briggs and for Ms. Welsh, because that was excellent, Ms. Welsh, by the way. Thank you for getting on that so quickly.
Well, I have to say, I give credit to Liz Faison, who was our associate. So when I read it, I was like, oh, this is so wonderful. You have all the reason. I mean, this just helps it just makes good sense when you hear what we're already doing.
That's great. Board Member Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Board Member Chair Briggs. Ms. Walker basically brought up what I was going to bring up about the integrity officer. And should we not be successful, and that's what I'm talking about, we have the option to have that legislation repealed. If it should, well, it's already gone through, but that was a bill that someone else put in mandating a service for our school system or our board, that they had not done their research because it's duplicative. The position of the integrity officer is doing the same thing that we already have an audit, internal audit. So not to pontificate on that issue, the bottom line is we do have a recourse, and we can have that repeal along with other legislation that may have been enforced on us that did not have, that has been mandated without fiscal, the funding to go along with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Miller. Mrs. Welch?
I just want to, Board Member Walker, she shared that tomorrow, I guess they're meeting on it, the committee's meeting on it to discuss. So based on the information we have, it says that if you're going to put in any like a written statement or something, you have to have it submitted through MGA between, I think it's 8 and 6, the very latest the day before. So we, of course, don't have anything that we can submit because we missed the timeline. That doesn't mean to say that we probably could share information after the fact. And this might be something that would be good also for Shelby, maybe just to have a conversation with the sponsor of the bill, just to share, this type of information. So at least to make them aware of it, of what is already happening in the school system and what the cost would be for the school system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Board Member Walker?
Yes, I was actually going to say that's a great idea, Ms. Welsh, for Shelby to talk to the senator who put this in place or wants to put it in place just for awareness. But I'm wondering this, though, even though we don't have time to do the official formal one, it sounds like we have enough information by way of what the school board, what the school system actually does for that to be sent. So we did have a senator reach out to myself and Chair Mickens-Murray today. And I think what the blurb that you gave is amazing to be able to send back. That's not proprietary information. It's something that the school board is doing. And what she can respond to is, hey, guess what? I just want you to know that there are some things that we are already doing that seems duplicative to this bill. So while we're getting our official documentation to get back to you, I want you to know that we sit on top of this and there's no fiscal note attached to it. Like that stuff, I believe that could easily be sent in an email, because what they're looking to do is just have perspective. They want to know, like, hey, because what if they do vote it in? They didn't know.
Exactly.
And I just think we owe that to be able to give to them while we, hold on while we get our stuff official. That's it. Thank you. And look at me coming in 50 seconds early.
Mrs. Welsh, I had a question, and then want to make it quick, but so the CSI, I know you said CSI, is it CSI, TSI in the Every Student Succeeds Act around like helping schools that are in the lowest 5%, whatever. I think it says something like that in the legislation. Is this to support schools that are having performance issues? I was trying to remember what that was about.
I would have to pull that up because I've been,
I know you said CSI. Anyway, if that was what I was gonna say was if that is the case, then something I would think about too is like just the as a, I don't know if this is a consideration you already have, but like as a best practice. I know we're doing a lot of those interventions already. But if there's like anything in particular in that bill, could we support the bill with amendments? You know, so like maybe it's like, oh, they're recommending something that would be helpful that isn't duplicative, but the rest of that is like not helpful for our district. So we would support it with like, you know, an amendment to say like removing something. I know this is also like statewide versus county. So like if it's something that we're already doing that's duplicative, would we have to spend additional funding on it since we're doing it? Is this just making it a mandate for other counties? So anyway, those are just questions I wanted to put in there based on like whatever statement blurb that we're going to send tomorrow for the hearing.
and when I read through it and see what they're requiring, because you have to do this template and put all this information in and everything. It'd be pulling a lot of information. You would need to have an additional person just to be able to do that kind of work. To have it ready, just because it's a lot of paperwork as you pull all these things together. There are a lot of metrics they're looking at. I mean, the best you can say is that you support it in theory because it's all, but it's all ready. And a lot of the things that the schools are doing that are required by law too. So it's not like we thought it up per se. I mean, we're just trying to meet all these other requirements. So, but I think it's a good idea though, as we look at, and that's why I do try to do, if I see a bill, I'm always looking to see, is there some aspect of it we can support and then recommend amendments. I do think that's a very good idea.
Yeah, I mean, your job is like hard enough. So I was only making a recommendation. I know you've got like a million things that you are navigating. So just wanted to leave that parting thought as we move on to item 4.0, items for discussion. So there are 6 policies for discussion this evening that will follow the 2.5 minute rule. Okay, yeah, I was thinking like, should we just do 2 minutes or 3 minutes? But yeah, we can just do 2.5 minutes. So item 4.1 is policy 5134, bullying, harassment, or intimidation. And that's just to provide the committee. Okay, so I'm sorry, there's something going on here that's not right. This specific policy is a bullying report sent to board members by the superintendent around policy 5134, bullying, harassment, or intimidation. Mrs. Welsh, if you can share more about this policy, please. Thank you.
So I went back I listened to the video to see what the conversation was. And this is when we also had 2 members of the Student Services Department with us last week and 2 weeks ago. And then we were looking at the policy and it said that there should be a report should be given. The superintendent should provide a report every year to the Board of Ed relate all around bullying, harassment, intimidation. And so it turns out that Student Services actually did provide a report at the end of the year, and it did go up to MSDE, but my understanding is that the superintendent had not shared it with the Board of Ed. So I did, after that meeting, send an email saying, you know, this needs to be sent. I'm assuming you got it. I got a response back saying, yes, we'll make sure the board members have it. If not, if you haven't received it, then I need to know because I need to follow up to make sure that you did get it. But listening to the video sort of ended with, well, why don't we first get the report so we've had a chance to see it, and once we have it, asked Dr. Holly to come back so she could really present on the report so we could see what it means, and then from there make decisions about the about the policy. There were several recommendations. They were all related to the administrative procedure and not to the policy itself. So that's why I do know that you all wanted to see the report. So I don't know, did you receive the report or not? And that could tell us whether or not we need to ask Dr. Holly to come back and maybe go over it with us.
Yeah, Mrs. Welsh, thanks for just diving in there. And I think I misread the script because it wasn't following the standard process. But so the goal was for me to share an update. And to your point, we haven't received anything, but there was something sent to the superintendent. He's acknowledged receipt of the request for the report, and his team is compiling that information. So the board, at least to my understanding, I've not received anything, and the board, I don't believe, has received anything. But if anyone has, then feel free to chime in here. And I think we're just waiting for that report to be shared with us before we take next steps. So I appreciate you recapping essentially what we had talked about with this and your recommendation from the last meeting.
I will follow up again with Chief of Staff just to make sure, because there is a report. I did get a chance to see it, but I think you all need to receive the report and have a chance to look at it before anything else.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I will follow up.
Okay, so more to come here. So there's nothing that we need to do with this specific policy, and we are waiting for that report. So we're going to move on to item 4.2, policy 0101, educational equity. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on policy 0101, educational equity. Mrs. Welsh.
So this policy is first of all, the current policy is extensive. It has loads and loads and loads of information about educational equity and looking at all different aspects and what are factors that students must deal with when they come to school, and what are the things that we as educators and staff working with students should be considering and addressing. And so the policy itself, I felt like there was a lot of language in there that shouldn't be sitting in a policy, but the actual ideas behind it in terms of definitions and standards was actually very good. So I did not make a lot of this changes. I do want to let you know, though, that COMAR does require that every 3 years this policy is looked at by the board, that they review it, and this is the appropriate time to be reviewing this policy. So that's why we're looking at it. So I basically, probably the biggest thing I did to the policy was take the language that was already there and just reformat it to put it into the sections we have now that we've addressed as what should be in a policy. So where they first had, I think, the purpose of this policy and then all these paragraphs, I just took those and actually, can you scroll up a minute, Cindy, and address those? And I think it's really important that the whole idea behind equity is really to ensure that students have what they need to be successful in school so that they can graduate with, options and opportunities to move forward with what they want. And it doesn't matter, what your gender is, what your race is, what you're whether you're disabled, whatever. It is the responsibility of the school system to ensure that we do whatever we need to do. Equity isn't about equal. It's really about ensuring that we do what we need to do and provide students what they need in order to move forward and be successful. And so these paragraphs, if you read them, and this might be one that we go through, but then you spend some time reading it for the next meeting or something. But this one is basically just under the policy statement is everything, all the language that was there previously. And then if you scroll down a little bit, Cindy, keep scrolling, please. And there it does talk about, so the policy itself had spent a lot of time looking at what's called adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. And so but it was like a resource document. So I did take some of the language out so that we're actually just policy language. But anyway, the purpose of the policy is really to establish standards of behavior that affirm the right of all students to have equitable access to a quality education that empowers them to receive a student-centered education and promotes college and career readiness. And then if you scroll further down, then we have definitions. It does explain what adverse childhood experiences are, ACEs. And it really does talk about all the things that students could possibly be experiencing at home or even internally or whatever that they're dealing with that can really impact their ability to access education the way they need to. And so, and it then is our responsibility to do what we need to help them access it. So it goes through that. And then if you keep scrolling, Cindy, if you can, yes. The next one has to do with the Community Performance Index, which the policy also references. And this consists, but it's not limited to like the affordability and the housing options and like longevity. Like the research shows, like if your family's moving all the time and changing homes and doing all this stuff, that the chances, and then you have also attendance issues, all those things can be major factors on a student not being as successful as they could be in the school environment. The same thing with workforce availability, parents having jobs, being able then to afford nutritional food, also living in a community where there's a high violent crime rate. And then the parent also being able to afford and have quality health care for their child. So those are also factors that students deal with, and when they're coming to school, that we as a school system have a responsibility to meet them where they are and provide them what they need to be successful. And then the next one goes into cultural proficiency, and basically it's really about ensuring, and it really goes a lot to our staff, is making sure that they are culturally competent or proficient, and have at least, they might not have had the experience, but they learn about knowledge about different cultures and the experiences that different cultures experience, and but especially as in terms of what our students, our diverse students, are dealing with, and then what is considered responsive instruction, curriculum, and learning environments. So those are all important things. And then we have educational equity, which I basically had described earlier. If you can scroll down, Cindy. And then we have holistic academic well-being, which is one of the ones that was sitting in the definitions previously, which is a sustainable mindset characterized by predominantly positive feelings, attitudes, positive relationships in school, resilience, self-optimism, and high level of satisfaction with learning experience. So, when you're a student and you might be dealing with, I don't know, child abuse, poverty, discrimination, crime, and all these kinds of things that shake your foundation. Probably one of the most important things for a student to have, and it's an internal thing, which we as adults can support, is for them to develop a sustainable mindset that really helps them have positive feelings and attitudes, positive self-talk, be able to develop positive relationships. And as teachers, that's one of the important responsibility of teachers, to be able to establish those things with students. So that talks about that. And then social identifiers, that people identify people by these social identifiers, but it's important to talk about it, because especially in light of when you look at our data and we're looking at demographics and looking at how students are achieving and where are the achievement gaps and stuff, looking at it in terms of these different social identifiers tells us a lot about how we are operating as a school system and where areas of need are in terms of improvement. So then if you keep scrolling down further, and then keep going, Cindy. Keep going. There's loads of stuff. This is where they had all the talking. So then we go to standards. So this again is language that was there previously. It talks about the goals of educational equity. And so it's talking about, high academic achievement, equal treatment for students and staff members by embracing and valuing and respecting their differences, equitable distribution of resources to schools and programs to support academic growth of students, professional development of staff. And I know even as the board, oftentimes you have conversations about what is provided in certain schools in the north of the county versus the southern end of the county, those kinds of things. And those conversations are really around equity and ensuring that we're providing what these schools need depending on their location. And then it talks about accountability, that we're all responsible, and that even in terms of looking at like the curriculum and academic supports, making sure those address, first of all, cultural differences, and the diversity of our community and of our students, and to ensure students are comfortable and can learn. And then looking at structural and institutional barriers to education, eliminating those. And if you can scroll down, and also eliminating discriminatory acts of hate, violence, insensitivity, disrespect at schools, work sites throughout PGCPS. So that's sort of the goals of the school system, of the Board of Ed, in terms of moving forward. And then the other standards would be number one. And again, this is all what's currently sitting in your policy, which I thought, I mean, there's no sense in redoing them because I think it looks pretty good. It talks about welcoming learning environment where diverse cultures and experiences will be acknowledged and valued and affirmed for their diversity. And then it goes and it goes into much detail, which you can read. I'm not going to read it all to you. Then talking about our hiring process and ensuring that we are recruiting and hiring culturally proficient workforce, and also that it reflects the diversity in our student body and communities. And then if you scroll further down, Cindy, it goes into shall welcome and empower all families to engage in their child's education. And that talks about that, and then reviewing and modifying policies and procedures and practices that might impede equitable access of students for fair, discipline, extracurricular activities before and after school. And I know there was a question, Chair Briggs, that you had sent me, and it actually was related to the incident that happened in Montgomery County. But when I started to pull that information together, you as a committee have actually really addressed a good number of policies in the past 2 years related to discrimination and anti-discrimination, Title IX. I mean, it was a wide range that I listed out that you have been working on. So, and just so everyone knows on the committee, I did tell Chair Briggs this, that every time we either develop a new policy or we make changes to policies, and the same with administrative procedures, then I go into the employee code of conduct and update it to incorporate any of the changes or any of the additions that need to be there. And then in addition to that, we also include it in the Safe Schools module on the employee code of conduct. So we make those changes there too. So our staff are constantly being updated on the changes that you all make in your policies, as well as the administrative procedures, so that they are well informed about what the expectation is. And then it continues, if you scroll down, it talks about the also falling in line with Student Succeeds Act. Every Student Succeeds Act ESSA consolidation plan, which we are required to submit, and also talks about educational equity. And then also considering the community CPI measurables and all the plans that when we're doing construction and renovation of existing facilities. And then if you scroll further down, and then implementation requirements or responsibilities. So this one's a little bit more in depth than what we normally usually, the main one we usually put in is about that the board directs the superintendent to develop an administrative policy to implement the administrative procedures to implement the policy. But this one talks about developing action plans with clear accountability metrics that would then also show up in our administrative procedures, and would also be reported to the board. And then also that the superintendent should be charged with proposing the necessary allocation of capital improvement and operating budgetary funds for hiring and professional development and necessary staff members to implement said goals, desired outcome strategies. And then the next one has to do with the superintendent formulating the PGCPS equity plan, which and this is in that language, I changed it a little bit, but it is in the current policy, which says, which shall be required to be submitted to the full board at the start of each academic year. And then the board is supposed to vote on that equity plan each year, no later than October 1st. And if you scroll a little bit further down, Cindy, I think there's one more. And then the board requires the superintendent to establish and maintain an administrative office dedicated to the implementation of the PGCPS equity plan. So I did email David Reese, who's in charge of the equity office that was developed on based on this policy. And I said to him, so can you share with me all the things you've been doing so that I could share it with the committee? And he said, oh, there's so many things. So I did not know whether or not you all would be interested in having him come and talk a little bit about what the equity office has been doing in the school system or not. That's up to you. But it sounds like I know they've done some things, prior, not this year, I haven't known much about, but previous years for central office staff. There were a lot of things going on in terms of equity, but he can better tell us, and so if you are interested in having them come and share, that's up to you. I can certainly ask him to do that. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, Ms. Welsh, thank you so much for that really great presentation. And I welcome the intro. I would love to have him to come speak about what the ECWA office is doing, but of course that's gonna be a vote for the full committee. So the floor is now open for discussion and comments. And colleagues, you'll be acknowledged in the order of your raised hand. And if you can't raise your hand, that's completely fine. You can just come off mute and let me know.
Okay, I can't raise my hand. I just want to agree with Ms. Welch in terms of inviting Dr. Reese in. He presented on the national level last year on equity. He has an outstanding presentation, and I think it would be very beneficial to this board to bring him in for staff development or what have you. Mr. Chair, I have to leave. I have another meeting that I have to attend at 7 o'clock. So thank you.
I think we're good if you leave. I think we'll have quorum still, and sorry that you have to leave, but thank you too for joining tonight.
Thank you. Good night, all. And
Good
thanks
night.
so much, Ms. Welch. You did a fantastic job.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Board Member Walker.
Yes, I didn't know if we were voting on bringing in the equity person, but I think it's a great idea too. I think you have enough support in order to bring it in. I don't know that we need to vote when you do the agenda, but if so, then I'm all in for that as well. Thanks.
Excuse me, Chair Briggs, you do not have a quorum, so you won't be able to do any other business if Dr. Miller. I can vote.
I thought it was 3 of them there. Rain left too?
No, Rain is here. I don't see.
I think it's only 4 of us, so I think we have a quorum. We have 3.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rain is still here. Okay, very good.
It's
Enjoy
your
your evening, Dr. Miller.
I'll keep you on. I'll just put myself on mute, but in case somebody walks out. But I would, because there's a lot of very important things that this committee needs to cover tonight.
We'd appreciate that.
Okay.
And
I'm still here, everyone.
okay, good. All right. So, Mr. Walker, are you done, or did you, Board Member Walker, did you still have questions? Okay, I'm at the end. So, Mrs. Welsh, I did have just a few things that I wanted to mention.
Okay.
Because I know that this is like a hot topic for a lot of school districts, is talking about equity. And there were a few buzzwords that I was just hoping that we could have in there. So I know you talked about holistic academic well-being.
Uh-huh.
And I just wanted to mention, if possible, I know that there's some discussion around social emotional learning.
Okay.
The just the impact that it has. I think it's equivalent to holistic academic well-being, but maybe something to look into. If terminology updates maybe. And then you talked about cultural responsiveness, but I just want to talk about culturally relevant pedagogy. So making sure that we have something in there that's like teachers, educators are also, as part of our policy, like they have that embedded in the actual curriculum. It's not just if a student walks in, you're using specific names or talking about specific things that matter to them and they're relevant to them, but also it's a part of like the content that they learn. And then I wanted to mention diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I know that there's a lot there right now that everyone's talking about, just across the field. And so I don't know if you had anything in there, but if so, if it's something just worth looking into, I'm not calling out any specific section.
What was that last one? Say it again, what you just said, equity?
Yeah, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay.
Yeah, or I guess now it's like equity, diversity, and inclusion, but just
And belonging.
And belonging, yeah, and that one too.
Okay.
And then I wanted to mention, you had talked about behavior. And I think I know PGCPS uses the PBIS model, the positive behavior intervention system, but just want to talk about restorative justice too. Practice, I think that's a part of PBIS, is like there are restorative justice practices, but just calling that on the policy to ensure that we have something in there about that. And I think that was about it.
And can I, so yeah, you're talking about like when we're trying to work through a student who might have some behavioral issues, disciplinary wise, but what the approach we might use to address that.
Essentially, yeah, exactly. Which we
Okay.
do that already. We have the PBIS model, so we're not like, just suspending them. There are other interventions that exist, but totally down the policy.
I know, but we absolutely can, I can do that. And I wanted to share with you that it does say here, under, B, it says that we would have, let's see, as well as provide students with an equal access to high quality, culturally diverse instruction and curriculum materials and supports. So do you also want to add that language you just said, about the curriculum?
Yeah, culturally relevant, culturally responsive pedagogy. Yeah.
Yep, okay. Okay.
Okay. So colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion?
May I say one thing? If we are gonna, if I can see if I can get Dr. Reese to come at the next meeting, maybe you wanna keep this as discussion only, because then in that conversation, it might cause you to think you might even want to change something else. I don't know, but that just gives you that opportunity if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. So, and I appreciate that. And I don't hear if there are any objections to Mrs. Welch's recommendation, speak now. Okay, there are not. So Mrs. Welch, please take under advisement the recommendation made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Policy 0101 and bring it back for further discussion at the next PNG meeting. So we're going to move on to Policy 4.3, Policy 2600, Records and Documents Management Program. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welch to provide the committee with an update on Policy 2600, Records and Documents Management Program. Mrs. Welch.
So this policy, this is just a revision of the policy, and the previous policy didn't have very much to it, but this now this current policy goes into a lot more detail and covering different areas. So I just want to share with you that the state's archivist office wants and requires that school systems, as well as other agencies, have a system in place where they are maintaining all their records, and they have a schedule for how long they are going to maintain the records. And then depending on the record, you can destroy it if you've kept it for so many years. So we actually, this is just background information. We actually, myself and Sally Robinson out of OGC, we did some research and we talked to some other counties. And as it turns out, we ended up speaking with Baltimore County Public Schools, because of all the counties, they have excellent whole system set up with all these schedules for retaining the records. And they shared that the task itself is so overwhelming that what they end up having to do was contract someone who actually specializes in this work. This is a whole specialty area in terms of these records. Because, and if you think about it, and what they said, this person who came in, they first went to find out what records each of the departments had, and then what does the law require in terms of how long you maintain these different records, and then set up these schedules. And then they end up having someone in one of their office assigned to being responsible for monitoring the records at all time. So if you were to go through our administrative procedures right now, you would see in so many of them, depending on if it's addressing some type of record, it'll say, and then you must maintain these records for 3 years, or you must maintain these records for 5 years, or whatever. So we have it scattered across hundreds of administrative procedures, how often how long you have to maintain these records. We have no language about what do you do once you've had them for 3 years or 5 years or whatever. So we're very, very much out of compliance in terms of what needs to be done. And myself and Sally we are already contacted the company, but we are looking at having conversations with both of our bosses to see if we can't move forward in doing this. So this policy itself doesn't go into that kind of detail. It really just says like the overall structure of what has to be in place, so then that's what we'd be working towards in the AP, which would also include the schedules for all the records that we keep. So that just gives you a little background information. So anyway, the policy statement is basically saying that we would, and that's odd. Mine has spaces. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, the policy statement talks about the fact that that we are, we have a program, which is the documents management program that we would ensure that we have been maintaining all of the records and documents we need to in a professional, efficient, and economic manner, and that it meets the standards and provisions of state and federal law. And then if you scroll down, Cindy, and I won't spend a lot of time going through each of these, but that gives you, so the whole purpose of the policy is to provide criteria and guidelines for system-wide record document management program. So then it goes into the electronic records and what they are. And then if you scroll down further, there's definition for employees. So this is very specific to this policy, the definitions of employee. And then there's a definition for destruction. And if you scroll down further, Cindy, and then what's considered a permanent records, because there are some records that are considered permanent that you would not actually destroy ever. And then if you scroll down further, we define record, so that lays out record, and then someone who would be designated by the superintendent to be the records manager to ensure, and they would also be the one who would be not only monitoring the records management activities, but serving as a liaison with the state archives and the Maryland State Department of Education. So once we have all these schedules developed, then they are supposed to go to the state archivist, who would then actually review and approve our schedules, basically. So it's pretty in-depth, intense type of process. And then this just defines for you what the schedules are in terms of how long you're supposed to maintain them, the different records, and then when can you destroy them, or you might not even be able to destroy them. So we need to, so then this goes into the standards, list out what the components of the program, the records management program should include. And if you keep scrolling down, Cindy, and then it talks about the fact that it has to comply with the Maryland Public Information Act, and of course FERPA, and any other state or federal laws and regulations that do apply. And if the records management manager would be responsible then to review and update the record retention schedules at least once every 2 years. And they would have to then be approved in writing by the superintendent, and also submitted to the state archives for review. And then also the records manager would be responsible for collaborating with the records management division of the Maryland Department of General Services and the state archives in the establishment and maintenance of the program. And then if we are maintaining permanent records that are not needed in a current operation of PGCPS, they would actually go to the state archives. And then they would also establish safeguards against damage, removal, or loss of records. And then as you go further, it says all school administrative office employees shall be responsible for adhering to the program's requirements concerning the records that they receive, oversee, and create. And I don't know what happened. This is different than what I have in my hand, so that's a little bizarre. But I'm not sure where that records and confidential came from. I'm just looking to see if something got cut off. No, I think it must have been something that should have been deleted. I'm not certain because I don't have it here. That's odd. Anyway, then the implementation would be the superintendent shall develop and maintain the administrative procedures to support this policy, which would include the retention schedules. That would be a part of those procedures. So that's about it in a nutshell.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. Mrs. Welsh, I don't think we have many comments, but I will say that I just, I already know that it's probably the case that this follows all federal requirements, and you've already mentioned that. I think you said any federal law needs to be. Yeah, so just access to records information, I know, is something that is really important. So just saying that for the sake of saying it for the record. Colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion?
I'm happy with advancing it.
Okay, so Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Policy 2600 and move it for action. Move it for action, right? We're going to advance it. So we're gonna,
Do you have to vote? Do you have to vote on that? No? Okay. Okay.
So we're gonna move to item 4.4, policy 9210, chair. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on policy 9210, chair.
So they, at the last committee meeting, there was a conversation about what would happen if in fact the chair, there was a vacancy in the office of the chair, and what would happen in terms of would the vice chair actually assume the responsibilities of the chair until there was an election for someone to fill that position, or would there automatically be an election? What would be the process? So I did, based on what I heard on the video, I did put in the language that you shared, and I do think someone had recommended, well, maybe we should have a definition for temporarily. So then I was thinking, well, does temporarily mean, like, let's suppose you have surgery, the chair has surgery and is out for a month. Is that considered temporarily? And then they come back. I felt like I needed to get your input on what you consider to be temporarily. That would be the first thing. I mean, I know, like, if you're out sick one night, that's certainly temporarily, but like, how far would you extend it? And then if you scroll down further, Cindy, I did put this, I think this was the recommendation of the committee, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because there was a lot of conversation around this, but I did put that in the event of a vacancy in the office of the chair, the vice chair will assume the responsibility of the chair until the annual meeting in December in which the election for the chair will be held. And then I have, in the event of a vacancy in the office of the vice chair, the remaining board member shall elect a replacement at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. And then, because you don't have anyone to fill the vice chair position, so you wouldn't want to wait until the December meeting. So that's why you would want to have that meeting, that have that election right away. But as far as for the vice chair filling the chair, you have the vice chair to fill the chair position so that person could stay on until December when there was an actual election. And then I think the D, which I didn't touch, but I do think someone, I want to say it was Dr. Miller, said, well, maybe we need the definition for temporarily, but says if both the chair and the vice chair are temporarily unavailable to carry out above responsibilities, the remaining members of the board shall select another board member to serve in the capacity of the chair. So we did not, so that's where I thought maybe it would be beneficial to have that definition of temporarily, but I wanted to get your input before I put anything there. So that was, I think, sort of reflects the conversation, but if there's changes or questions or whatever, please let me know.
Okay, colleagues, the floor is now open for discussion and comments. And I'm going to go with Board Member Rivera Forbes first.
Thank you, Chair Briggs. Ms. Walsh, my Wi-Fi has been cutting a bit in and out, so I did lose you at some points, but I was wondering if you said essentially if a chair has to leave for some reason, the vice chair would step up and take their place, and then you would vote for another vice chair in the meantime, since you can't vote for the chair until December?
So yes, so if the vice, now this is proposed language, so it can be anything, but if the chair, let's say that there was a vacancy in the chair position mid-year, and then you have the vice chair, so the vice chair would step in, assume the responsibilities until the meeting in December where it's the annual meeting where then the election of the chair would occur again. Of course, that would open up a vacancy in the vice chair if she's filling he's filling the office of the chair. And in that instance, since there's no one to fill that, you would actually have to vote on that immediately so that you'd have someone to fill the vice chair's role.
So if that was to happen, I know this is a very rare case, but I'm wondering, what if the vice chair decides that they would not want to run for chair around December and they would rather stay in the vice chair position, but they're just carrying out that temporary duty? Would then the position for vice chair still be voted on regardless because of the situation at hand?
So are you saying that the vice chair would, when the opening came up, and let's say that is, I don't know, August or September, and they now have 3 or 4 months, they would have to be the chair, but they don't really want to be the chair. Are you saying, would they have the ability to say, I don't want to be the chair, and then instead you would actually be voting for the chair at that point, since the vice chair didn't move into it? Is that what you're asking
Well,
about?
close to it. Like I said, this is a very rare instance. Most people won't turn down a chair position, but I'm saying for the like you said, the chair ends up having to leave for some reason, and then the vice chair is sitting in their current seat, and they have to move over and transition into being the temporary chair. I know you said immediately after the vote of the vice chair would have to take place, and I was wondering if that person that's vice chair decided they didn't want to run for chair, and that vote immediately takes place, would they lose the chance for them to be vice chair of the board anymore?
Well, so they'd only be filling the position for the chair up until the actual vote, which would be in December. And so I mean, they would then, I mean, I guess the following year, they still could, the committee, I mean, the board could vote on them to be the vice chair the following year. They don't have to run for chair that year. They could, I mean, I don't know what your internal process is, but they don't have to, they could do whatever they want once it comes to December. They could be the chair or the vice chair, really.
Okay, I was a bit confused because I know you said immediately vote for the vice chair. So I was wondering if that was just right after that transition happened, but I understand now.
So that, just to be clear, the reason that I put that in there is because the whole purpose of having the vice chair is to fill in case the chair can't be there, to just pick up the responsibility. So let's just say your chair is sick, then you would want a vice chair to fill in. So if in fact there becomes a vacancy and you still have several months of the year before you get to December, you don't want to be sitting there that period of time without a vice chair, because the vice chair filled the chair's position. So therefore you would want to immediately elect a new vice chair, because you need that backup person just in case your chair might get sick or something at a meeting and couldn't be there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Welsh. And if Smob Rivera Forbes, if you have additional questions, we can come to you for round 2. So we're gonna move to Board Member Walker.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, Vice Chair Rivera Forbes for the policy and governance.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, I was just gonna remind Board Member Rivera Forbes that this is only for until December. We have regular voting in December, and that won't change. This is only in case there is a temporary need. Ms. Welsh, I think the only clarification that we need, the only clarification that we need on that is just that temporary, that we do have, this is just assuming until we have our regular votes in December, which I think is clear, but if there's still questions, then we can just make sure that we're very clear on that. The other piece is, I think what we talked about is this for overall continuity, so that we don't have 2 elections, one in the temporary need by the board and then one inside of the December regular one, that the consideration, and we can talk as a committee, that the vice chair appoints in a temporary position so that we don't have 2 votes that are going to be happening, a temporary one and a permanent one that's happening in December. So I just wanted to add that I'm a fan of the appointment.
So are you saying that once the vice chair moved into the chair's position, then it would be the vice chair would just go ahead and appoint someone? I mean, the new chair would then appoint someone for the vice?
Yeah, that's what, now we can talk about it as a committee and I can get overruled. I just think that in my mind and Lolita's mind, it makes sense that if it's only temporary and we know that we're going to have our real elections that's coming in December, that instead of having 2 elections, which could be a short term for both elections happening in December and in a temporary spot, that when the vice chair moves over to the chair position, that chair then appoints for a temporary position until we have elections by the full board. And the reason is for continuity. Just so I'm not really continuity, that's not the right word. It's more of I think it's disruptive is where I'm going with that. That's the reason why that I wanted to put that proposal there. I'll vote however we go, but I just think it's disruptive for us to be having 2 full elections just for a temporary need. I think it's well in the purview of the new chair to be able to appoint for a temporary position. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Walker. Before I go to Chair McInnes-Murray, Cindy, I saw you raised your hand. Not sure if you had a technical question.
Yes, I just, for clarity on Vice Chair Walker, are you saying that, say for example, sorry, Miss Judy, but in next week, Miss Judy goes out extended period of time, you go up to the role. Are you saying you're gonna appoint a temporary vice chair, and in December, we have our regular chair and vice chair?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. Thank you
Okay.
for reiterating. Yes, because in
That's good.
December, we have our regular, which is already inside of our policy, our regular elections for our borough policy. Yes, that is what my recommendation is. Thank you.
Okay, Chair Mickens Murray.
You're muted.
Thank you. I know. I thank you so much. Maybe I missed something, but I know I missed a couple of meetings and I don't even know what prompted this discussion. So could someone share the background with me of why we are here talking about 2 elections? Please.
Mrs. Welsh, I'm gonna turn to you because I know you've had the floor and you've given background so far. I'm happy to chime in, or Vice Chair Walker, if you would like to as well.
So I'll just say what I know is that this was up for revision because 1079, House Bill 1079 had some information about what the responsibilities of the chair was, and it was on the work plan. So I did put all that information in there. And then I think originally I did not have this kind of detail. I merely was saying previously that that if the chair wasn't there, the vice chair fills in, basically. And then if in fact there was a situation, I think it said if the chair and the vice chair wasn't available, I think that was my previous language, then the rest of the board members would have to choose someone to fill those positions. And then in the conversation at the last meeting, I think there was recommendations for maybe refining it and spelling it out a little bit more so that we would know who would be the next person to. I might have said previously that they would have to be an election for the vice chair. Then the recommendation came up about just the vice chair assuming the responsibilities for the chair if we had a vacancy mid-year. So this is really the changes right now that are being recommended are based on conversation at the last meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in too. I mean, the
Go
short
ahead.
answer to the easy question is that the bill, I mean, it was up for revision. And so we do the regular thing and talking about it and making the recommendations. The bill, it was already up for revision. So we don't want to keep on going back to it. We're making it as thorough as possible for our committee. Standard
Okay, so-
practice.
So you keep saying the bill, you mean the policy?
You are absolutely 1000% correct. Thank you so much for the clarification and wording.
Ready to say a bill. All
But,
right.
but
I just wanted to make sure that nobody was thinking.
It started with
I
the
or
bill
something.
discussion, started with the bill, but you are correct. It is the board policy that we're looking at. It started with the discussion of a bill. It's back on the recording as well, but you asked what's the background, and that's how it started.
Okay, was the bill 1079 with the changeover from elected to appointed? Is that the basis for this discussion?
But they actually had in 1079, they had a whole section where it just listed out the responsibilities of the chair.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah. I
So
read
that's
that.
why, that's what drove this, that's what drove the actual policy thing. But as far as the discussion, so the other thing I did look at was other counties' information they had about chairs, what chairs do or what, like things like that. And there was some language, and I forget which county, that talked about like what you do, what's the succession plan, basically. And so I added that language, the first set of language, and then the committee discussed and talked about changing it. So that's how we got to here right now.
Okay, because one of the things that I don't want us to do is go down a path that the law does not support. So if in fact the background to this is 1079, when we switch over from appointed to elected, then I would like to see us go and get an opinion from the Attorney General or somebody. Because as I understand it, unless I die, I don't tend to do that. I know I'm old, but I don't tend to die. But unless I die, my understanding is that the House Bill 1079 kicks in on July 1st, and that we will take the regular course and change over in December. If I am wrong, then somebody needs to go to wherever you need to go to get that clarified now. Because of what I don't want is for us to look inept when June 30th come and people be under the conception that 3 people will just leave the board. I do not believe that that is the case, not with the law as it is written today. Okay, so that's why I wanted to know the background for this. And I now also believe that if you're given a vice chair total authority, and I don't know what that authority would be based on other than the vote of this committee and this board, then if you get a whole new board, I am sure that would be revisited. That to me does not even support the premise that you support elections, because you're already integrating into a policy some degree of appointing someone to something. So that doesn't make sense. So I just wanted to go on the record to say that. So thank you.
And if you have more to say, Chairman Kingsbury, then of course we can do a round two. Mrs. Welsh, did you have a comment?
I do. So it goes to what Chair Mickens-Murray just talked about in terms of 1079. I do read the law the same way you read it, and that the turnover doesn't occur till December, because it references also the general election. You can't be bringing in your elected members without until you get through the general election. Now, saying that, Dennis disagrees, because he said the law talks about 10 elected board members, which we do have 10 elected board members, is what he said, in addition to all the appointed board members. So he asked, we just had this conversation today.
Okay.
He asked that I set up a meeting with him and OGC and myself to really discuss this in depth, to figure out what is it that the law is saying, because I think we might have a disagreement in the interpretation of what the law says. So, but
Yeah.
I don't think that this other stuff that you saw in this thing had anything to do with 1079 in this regard. We didn't even talk about that in terms of elections or anything.
Yeah, but but my experience is if you pass this policy, then that opens the door for a degree of chaos come June, unless we have clarity. And what I am suggesting, instead of you and Shipley and Horn sitting down, that we go straight to maybe through the county executive or whoever we need to go through to get an opinion from the Attorney General, because that cuts to the chase. And the decision is made, and everybody will have the same understanding from an authority that everybody respects.
So can I just share with you that in one of our other policies, I attempted to get an opinion from the Attorney General, and they shared that they no longer give out their opinions freely, but that it has to be whoever is in charge of the organization. And in this instance, because it's a board, it would have to be you as the chair, Mickens-Murray, asking the Attorney General to give you an interpretation. I mean, I'm sure Dennis could write a letter for you or something, but it would have to come from you to request it for them to even honor the request.
Okay, but I understood that we in the school system couldn't go to the Attorney General. You're saying we can't?
Well, I sent an email to the Attorney General once on another one of our policies to get clarification. And the response back I got was, he's not going to respond to me, because I'm just me. But if I had the head of the organization request an interpretation, probably because he was getting so many inundated with so many requests, he said, if you have the head of the organization, in this instance, it would either be yourself or it would be the superintendent. Then that's when they would take the time to research the question and come back with a response.
All right, then I will have Dennis tomorrow. I will send an email for him to research this to see, first of all, can I do it? And second of all, if I can't do it, how can it get done? Okay, thank you. I won't type any more time.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be heard briefly. I'm actually still on.
Oh, good, Dennis.
What I would probably suggest is that maybe we do a joint letter, the superintendent, the Board of Education, and we'll throw the county exec in there as well. That way we're all covered. That way the Attorney General would have to, respond, because all 3 heads of the organizations that are affected would be signatures on the letter.
Okay, so can you coordinate that with all of them, or do I need to call somebody?
Just send me an email,
Okay.
and I will talk to the county attorney's office and I'll talk to the general counsel, but you may also want to do an email to the superintendent and the county executive as well, so that way they are aware that I'm working with their legal departments to try to get this resolved.
Okay, I'll do that tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Okay, and Robin, can you send me the email you got from the AG's office, saying that you couldn't do it, but it had to come from the head of the organization?
I'll have to find it, but yes, I can send that to you. Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, no problem. Board Member Walker.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure, I just said that our work and our policy for the Board of Education in this particular bill was not predicated on this policy. The question was, how did we begin talking about it, as I understood the question, and we began talking about the bill some type of way. Everybody can go back and listen to the recording, and then we moved into our policy. So our policy is not predicated upon 1079. And so I just want to make sure we draw distinctions on that, because it's an untruth to say that that is why we are updating our policy. It's not true. The second piece that I just, thank you, Dennis, for coordinating these efforts, because the way I read the bill, it was a cease on July 1 or June 30th, whatever it reads. And then we have our true elections in December. So it'll be good to get any clarity on that, because if there's if there is confusion here, I mean, I've talked to a number of legislators and they help me to understand it. So it'll be good to hear what you get from the authority, as I'm hearing is the right authority. I don't know. The other piece that I just wanted to land on there is what needs to be true for, is it that we're pausing this until we hear back? Because these are two different things. The bill 1079 and this policy that we're having for our own group and for the Board of Education. And so I'm just concerned that we're putting a pause on something as related to a bill. I do mean bill for our own policy. I do mean policy for us, for the Board of Education. They're delinked. And so I just want to understand where we're going. Maybe this is addressed to Chair Briggs. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we're pausing anything. I do think we're going to get additional information, you know, just to help to support with whatever happens with 1079. But I don't understand it to be that we're pausing anything with this discussion.
Thank you for the clarity. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure we just thank you so much.
Yep, I'm not sure if that was me or you. I did have a question. I'm going to just lower some hands, but I did have a question about the policy. So I actually thought that that Board Member Rivera Flores brought up a good point, because I could see the possibility of someone who's a vice chair saying, I just don't have the capacity to serve in the chair role, because it requires a lot. And in the off chance that someone who happens to be the vice chair does say, I'm not suggesting that would happen anytime soon, but if that were to happen, because the policy is kind of covering all possibilities, I do think we should have some kind of additional piece in there, Mrs. Welsh, around probably an expedited election process for both the chair and the vice. You know, I guess it really would just be for the chair versus the vice chair. So I guess it'd be either or. Like what you have right now is, if the chair seat is vacant, then the vice chair can assume the role. And then we have to determine if it's going to be an appointment or an election for the vice chair role. So I guess also in the off chance that a vice chair doesn't want to assume the role of chair, there would be a special election for the chair role.
Okay, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. And I just want to put on record, my personal opinion is, I think that because given that the school board has so many mixed opinions, and that's part of the democratic processes that we elect folks, and we vote for even the chair and vice chair, I think it would, from my perspective, fit better to have an election for whichever role, whether it's vice chair or chair. I think we should have elections, because there may be differing opinions with board members. And so I think it should really be a democratic process where everyone has an opportunity to weigh in on who serves in those leadership roles. So that's my opinion on that.
Chair Briggs, I think then, because we have two opinions related to that, one being either the vice chair just picks someone to finish up the time period, or or we have, as you just said, the election of a vice chair. The new chair, who was the vice chair, would just pick someone, or else we'd have an election for the vice chair. Probably that's something you want to take a vote on to see where the committee stands on it, so that I know which way you want to go with that language.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
want
I think I was the only one. Maybe Juanita was, I'm not really sure. I forget what she was last time, but I'm fine on shifting mine. It's not enough that I have to push back on that one. I'm fine with an election.
Okay.
I just thought it was disruptive, but I'm absolutely, it's not a big deal to me.
Okay, and I would say if we did want to, then maybe for a later date that we have like an election, like when we have the next discussion about this, because I don't think that Dr. Miller's on, and I also don't know how engaged Rivera Forbes is right now, or if she's even ready to vote on that. But it sounds like we don't need to. But if we did, we could do it for a future policy and governance meeting.
That's fine. I agree. Thank you.
All right, so colleagues, this policy, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion? I think we're all agreeing it's being kept for further discussion. So, Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendation made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee meeting on Policy 9210, and bring it back for further discussion at the next Policy and Governance meeting. We're going to move on to item 4.5, Bylaw 9271, Student Board Member. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on Bylaw 9271, Student Board Member.
Okay, so that one is the hold on a second. This is where this is another one. I think, just to be fair, I think House Bill 1079 was sort of written in a very confusing fashion, and it has caused some concerns related to its interpretation, because Dennis and I have had conversations. I've had conversations with OGC, and we still don't have clarity on what are the rights of the student board members. So when we went, so I met with OGC because they were reviewing this policy, and our policy right now, if you'll scroll down, Cindy, so we can talk about the voting rights. This goes to the voting rights. And if you go, keep going. Keep going. I think it's this next one here, right above there. Where did I see it? Keep going. Keep going up a little bit. Scroll up, please. Keep scrolling. I am looking for the voting part. Here we go. Right there. Don't move. Okay. So it talks about the fact that that the student member may vote on all matters before the board except those related to collective bargaining decisions, teacher and administrator disciplinary matters under 6202 or other personnel matters. So when in meeting with OGC, what we came up with is that, yes, those were the changes that, so if you look at the bill and they talk about things that are happening up until July 1, 2024, and then it talks about things that will happen after July 1, 2024. And so if you, so now it's been codified, and LexisNexis is what the school system uses to look at, the actual code. And in it, it talks about that up until July 1, 2024, the student board member can vote on all matters except these 3 items. And then it says then starting July 1, 2024, it says the student member can vote on all matters before the board except those related to, and then it goes back to the language that sat there like in 2022. It says, except to capital and operating budgets, school closing, reopening and boundaries, collective bargaining decisions, student disciplinary decisions, teachers and administrative disciplinary matters, and other personnel matters. So it is the oddest thing we've ever seen. So then, and I did share that with Dennis, and he also wants to do a little bit more research, but then I went to the fiscal note, and the fiscal note says that it's been changed and changed so that not just this year, but next year, that it is what we have in our policy. So there's actual discrepancy in what's actually sitting in the bill as compared to even what the people putting together the fiscal and policy note interpreted the bill to mean. So it is so the reason I asked this, so the question, so the concern is, number one, is getting clarity on what is, I can't imagine that anyone in their right mind would write legislation that would only get increased voting rights for 1 year and turn around and take them away. That doesn't even make sense. And I'm certain that the policy analysts that put together the fiscal policy note probably must have felt the same way, and so read it the same way as we have read it and put into our policy. But if in fact it is true with what the LexisNexis is sharing, then the fact of the matter is that our policy that we'd be writing and finishing up, because it's right now, it still hasn't gone to the board for even public comment, and then we have that, and then first reader, second reader, would be wrapping up closer to the end of the school year. But then it wouldn't be up to date with the law if in fact the law is truly going back to the way it was before. So we have to get, so before we go, my recommendation, I did talk to Dennis, if he's still on, he can certainly weigh in on this. But we have to get, we got to get some kind of clarification on this, because there's not even, there's no consistency even between the fiscal note itself that they published and the law, the bill. So, but if we move forward, you're going to be voting on something that could be changed starting July 1, which doesn't make sense either. Now, I do think we have time, in the sense that we could, until we figure out what is it really telling us, because why would they even have that sitting in the law for the take away those rights in starting July 1, 2024. But we still have time before this goes in effect. It still doesn't change anything, though, because even though our policy hasn't changed, we do have a law right now that says the student board member has the right to vote on everything except these 3 areas. And so we would still be moving in the same direction that we're doing. It's just that we wouldn't finalize it till we have some clarification on what is the bill saying, and why did the fiscal note say one thing and then LexisNexis has something totally different. It's very odd. I've never seen anything like this before. And I don't, is Dennis still on or not? Yeah, Dennis, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this or what.
I'm still on, and actually, like you said, we had this discussion earlier today, and I'm in complete agreement that we should push this off for further discussion, probably till after the legislative session. That way we can see what the new bill, if the new bill passes, and we can also figure out what was meant by the old bill as well.
Okay. Robin, I have a question. And I know, well, I want to say colleagues, the floor is now open for discussion. So I do see board member Rivera Forbes, Vice Chair Rivera Forbes hand first. I'll go to her and then I will recognize myself.
Thank you, Chair Briggs. So thank you, Ms. Welsh, for that update.
Okay.
My apologies. Thank you, Ms. Welsh, for that update. I do find it very concerning as the student member of the board to be running in circles on this bill, just considering the fact that we all know the history that we followed up to here now, and how this bill has been brought up multiple times and there has been no clarification behind it. And that's frustrating for me, because I have asked many times, is this right? Is this right here? Is this right here? And then now I'm being told the fiscal policy note is not correct. I'm being told that it's not aligned with the overall bill now, even though we have been in discussion with this bill since, I believe, October. So it is upsetting now that we're at this point where we are working on a policy that is extremely important for the next student member of the board, and we're meeting a spot now. And I'm not, like I said, blaming anyone. I'm just expressing the concerns of how frustrating that is. Especially just with the entire process that we have been through online and offline. So I definitely would like some clarification. I think it's been needed for a long time now. It's no reason why there should be no clarification now in February. So I would like that update. Thank you. I also would like to see the contrast between the fiscal note as well.
Yeah, those are good points. And Mrs. Welsh, I just wanted to get clarity. So what's the contradicting bill that's being proposed? What's the bill number?
You mean the current bill number that's out there?
Yeah.
That one is, let me see if I can find it. It's, Senate Bill 386.
Okay. Because I guess my question is like, so because if they're making a proposal and it contradicts a piece of legislation that was just passed, then what's the intent of that current, like the proposed bill? Well, I'm assuming it's not addressing the exact same thing, that just happens to overlap.
Well, all I know is, and I hear what Rain shared in terms of what she heard in terms of the bill, but the bill actually references these different counties and does talk about, if I can find our county here, the student member shall be, and this is for Prince George's County, should be public schools should be a 11th or 12th grade student in Prince George's County Public Schools during the student's term in office. And then it says the student board member may vote on a matter that relates to, then it takes out collective bargaining, teacher, administrator, disciplinary matters, and other personnel matters, and it puts in the dismissal of or other disciplinary actions involving personnel, hearings held under 6202 of the article, and appeals to the county board under 4-205. So the bill itself, I mean, it doesn't specifically address other counties too, but it specifically addresses Prince George's County in this bill and what the student board member can vote on.
Okay. And the only reason why I asked that question is I'm wondering if it's like a simple step of, I know you said that the bill is being proposed. So it's like, is there a way to kind of bring that to the attention of the sponsor to say, hey, you're saying stuff that is just not making sense because you just passed a law. You know, I mean, it makes, like you said, it makes no sense. You don't pass laws to just say like, don't follow the law.
Well, so
Or
this,
would that bill amend 1079's language?
oh, it could amend, yeah, it would, it could absolutely make a change, yes.
Chair
but-
Bray,
Yes.
my apologies, but I just wanted to clarify again that there was an amendment that was submitted to the Ways and Means Committee of the House of Delegation. And in that amendment, it essentially stated that this current SMOB voting rights will not be limited for SMOBs that already have voting rights, like Anne Arundel County having full voting rights. We realized the error in that bill that was submitted, and we did request that amendment be put there so the Anne Arundel County SMOB, Prince George's County SMOB, Montgomery County SMOB would not have to lose their rights that are already extended. And then if the boards decide to push up the rights, they can. Now I actually don't see, I'm still waiting on how I can see the concerns that are brought up for House Bill 1079. But I don't see how that would correlate entirely with that bill, because if it was passed, it still wouldn't affect our county with that amendment, if I'm correct.
Okay. Well, then I think Mrs. Welsh, that's probably part of the calculation, is just getting clarity on that piece. And then we could just come back and have a discussion. Chair Mickens-Murray, I see you have your hand up.
You've already said what I was going to say, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great.
And,
All right.
and Rain, it just looks, because I'm looking at the bill right now, it looks like it had, they might have discussed it in the committee, but it hasn't, the amendment, I don't think has been made yet. It'll probably come up maybe in a day or two. I just don't see it here right now. I mean, they made it, but you know what I mean? They didn't publish the change is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But as far as your frustration with 1079, I'm in absolute agreement, because my understanding was absolutely that those three, and the fiscal note too, was the understanding that your rights have, the student board's members' rights had been expanded to include to not limit all these, have all these exceptions, but to only accept in those three areas. So I think it is very disconcerting, and it has to get cleaned up so that the new board member next year, the new student board member, you know, we're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Chair Mickens-Murray?
Yeah, the only thing that I will add is maybe it might behoove you, since you guys are writing these letters, these form letters, ask the question.
Mhm.
Ask the question. If our student board member understands that there's an amendment, just inquire about it. because some things move slowly in a bureaucratic system. Okay? Thank you.
Good recommendation. All right, so colleagues, it sounds like we want to keep this this policy for further discussion. So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight. As you're tracking this and getting more information about all the moving parts and pieces, we appreciate you and Mr. Whitley for your work on that. And we're going to move to item 4.6. I want to close out. Please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Bylaw 9271 and bring it back for further discussion at the next PNG meeting. We're going to move to item 4.6, Bylaw 9360, meetings of the board. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on Bylaw 9360, meetings of the board.
So we had a in one of our board meetings, we had well, our committee meetings, we talked about the idea of breaking out 9360 so that it would address different aspects of the meeting process. And because right now it's so heavy, 9360, that it's not very user-friendly because you got to go piles of stuff to try to find anything in it. So I went to the National School Board Association. They have a whole thing that lays out how boards of eds, how they should organize their all their policies, and under the governance section, they do have it broken out by different areas. I also looked at a couple other counties, how they have the governance section for the policies for the Board of Ed, how they lay it out. And so I'm following basically, I looked at Baltimore City, but then I also looked at National School Board. And so the first one, and I certainly can't break them all out one time because I have so many other things going on, but I thought maybe I can at each meeting bring a new section of 9360 to you so that we have all these sections broken out. So the first one just talks about regular board meetings. And just so you know, because there's no language in this that talks about agendas or anything else, because if you look at how the NSBA stuff is broken out, there's a whole section that you would have then about developing agendas. And then there'd be another one on your closed meeting sessions. And then there might be another one on special meetings. So with the idea being that if you're looking up something, you can easily just go to the policy or the bylaw that addresses it versus having it all lumped together in one area. So this one, the first one I did was take it's regular board meetings. And in essence, all I did was cut out of 9360 everything that we had discussed on the regular board meetings, so that we're very clear about what is involved in a regular board meeting. And this is all the language that we've had previously that was there, but it's just now it's specific to the regular board meetings. So it's telling you the guidelines for the regular board meetings, and I have a couple definitions because the policy does reference going into closed session, but there's no real language about closed session. And then if you scroll down, the definition, can you scroll down, please? The definition for what a regular board meeting is, and then what a work session is, because a work session does fall under the regular board meeting. And then as far as standards, if you scroll down further, you'll see it talks about where the meetings are going to be held. Because that was, again, that came right out of 9360. And then if you scroll down further, keep scrolling, Cindy, talks about that all meetings and work sessions of the board are considered regular board meetings unless specifically designated as a special meeting, emergency meeting, capital improvement meeting, retreat, award recognition, committee meeting, or a public hearing. And then when we did this before in 9360, two changes that we did talk about. One was the invitation to participate in silent prayer or reflection. So instead of actually praying in the board meeting, you would just invite anyone who was attending to either participate in a silent prayer or reflection. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, I think, oh, wait a minute, community recognition, that was not there before. And we put that in because that's become a new part of the process. And then this just has all the sections of the regular board meeting. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, then you have your work sessions. Again, this is all the language that came out of 9360 that we had worked on previously. And then if you keep scrolling down, and then it just says the board chair will be responsible for presiding over all board meetings. And in the absence of the, here we go. And in the absence of the board chair, the vice chair will proceed over a board meeting. So that is basically it in the nutshell. There's nothing new in this. It's just restructuring of that particular bylaw.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. Okay, seeing none, colleagues, should this, if you object to this policy being advanced for action or being advanced for action, please speak now. Okay, Mrs. Welsh.
Board Chair Briggs, I do not think you have a quorum now. I'm looking at the names that are here.
We have 4 members, and we have me and Dr. Miller and Rivera Forbes. We have 3 out of the 4, so we have 4.
I don't think Dr. Miller is there, but okay, if you say that, fine.
So yeah, and I think that's why she stayed on, was because for the voting purposes. So we're gonna move forward. And Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Bylaw 9360 and bring move it forward for action. Thank you so much.
Okay. And I'm thinking until we get all these bylaws taken care of, I probably won't assign a number yet till we get to see everything we have, if you're okay with that.
Yep, that's fine with me. If it helps you, then it helps me. Okay, we're gonna move to item 5.0, items for review or action. There are 7 items for review or action. We will also follow our 2.5-minute rule during the discussion. So item 5.1, policy intellectual property rights. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward policy intellectual property rights to the full board for recommendation to seek public comment? And Vice Chair Rivera Forbes, you're probably gonna have to come through for each of these, so just letting you know.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So may I have a motion to forward policy intellectual property rights to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? You can just say so moved.
Oh, so moved.
Okay. And I second that. Is it moved and seconded? I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of the new policy.
So the new policy is for intellectual property is it really just talks about all the legal standards that are involved in using copyright materials. And it could be anything, not just your actually hard copy, but it could be audio, digital, online video materials, internet-based software. And then it goes into what the expectations are for the Prince George's County Public School employees and students. And the policy itself addresses the copyright standards, and it does emphasize that employees are responsible for knowing the requirements of the copyright law. And that that even though many of these things, sometimes people think, well, because I'm a teacher and I'm using it for instruction, none of this pertains to me, but absolutely some of it does pertain. And so it's always their responsibility also to follow through. And then it talks a little bit about the fair use. The policy itself talks about what qualifies as fair use and different copyrighted material work, as well as the federal law, the Technology, Education, and Copyright Harmonization Teach Act, which actually tries to balance the needs of educators and students engaged in distant learning or online or virtual learning environments. And then there's language in the policy. It talks about work made for hire, and which that if you're an employee of the school system and you are following up, making something that your supervisor has asked you to complete as part of your job responsibilities and everything, that it is the Board of Education owns that work. And you as the employee, even though you developed it, made it and everything, it is, you don't have any ownership of it. And then the other one has to do with students and the fact that student work product under Maryland law, that Board of Ed can't claim any ownership rights, property rights, or copyright a student's work product of the student enrolled in PGCPS, oh my God, PGCPS, when they are, the student has, created or performed or did whatever as a student for Prince George's County Public Schools. And so that's a basic, and the other thing, the policy does talk about the fact that not only does it apply to PGPS employees, but also to our contractors and our vendors. So I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and this was really pretty, I think, straightforward. We had a good discussion last time. So, colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding the new policy to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment. We're going to move on to item 5.2, policy 0115, information technology services, acceptable usage guidelines. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward policy 0115, information technology services, acceptable usage guidelines to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment?
So moved.
Okay. And I second it. It's been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of the policy 0115.
So this policy basically talks about what the standards of acceptable use are for any of our education academic online materials, any technological materials, electronic digital tools. And then there's also administrative business functions for the school and the district, communication with also authorized individuals for the school, and then accessing digital tools, resources, and websites approved by PGCPS. And then it talks about what are prohibited uses, which would be like transmitting or accessing harmful content on the internet, downloading and installing unauthorized software, engaging in cyberbullying or harassment, violating copyright laws or plagiarizing information, engaging in activities that disrupt the network or compromise its integrity or security, accessing or transmitting personal information without authorization, using the network for personal gain or commercial purposes, and engaging in any activity that is prohibited by school law. I did include one little section that we did not have there before, and if you scroll down, I have it here under B, and then I have it here again. If you right here, it says PGCPS reserves the right and has express responsibility to monitor and filter network traffic to ensure compliance with acceptable use policy and to protect the safety and security of all users. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, Cindy, keep going. Oh, I actually changed the definition of cyberbullying so that it's in line with our definition of cyberbullying, I think in our Title IX policy that we had not done not very long ago. So I thought it's better to have them aligned. So I did include that. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, keep going. I think there's one more. Yes, here. I also have random electronic surveillance may be used to detect when a user accesses prohibited internet websites, monitor internet access for use that is not instructional or work-related. Each user agreement to such surveillance shall be a condition of user's use of PGPS technology components. So it is an understanding that if you're going to be using our network and our computers and email process and everything, the system does have the right to monitor those things. Like nothing's ever private. That you have to follow the rules of acceptable use when you're using our materials. So that's it.
Makes sense. Okay. So colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding policy 0115 to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. Moving to item 5.3, policy 1500, Parent and Community Advisory Council. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward policy 1500, Parent and Community Advisory Council to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? Vice Chair Rivera Forbes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, my mic is all over the place today. So move.
Okay. And I second. It's been moved and seconded. I will yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of policy 1500.
So basically this policy, probably the biggest reason it was revised was to provide clarity so that the board and the parent community have understanding of how to implement the policy. And just some of the major changes that were made to the policy was the responsibility of the PCAC to advise the board and the superintendent that the membership shall reflect, and this actually came out of 1079, reflect the geographic, racial, ethnic, cultural, and gender diversity of the county. That the superintendent shall provide a list of recommended applicants for each district from which the board members will appoint a member to represent each district. That PCAC members are required to submit an application if they're interested in seeking a second term, and that is what we did have a comment on today. Not doing the application, but the committee had discussed that pretty thoroughly and felt there should be an application. So I don't know if that's something you want to come back and look at. And then also that all members representing districts must be the actual districts must be a parent of a student currently enrolled in Prince George's County Public Schools, and that every effort will be made to stagger the terms. And then within 1 month of a vacancy on the PCAC, the position will be advertised. And by March 1st, vacancies for upcoming school years will be advertised, and the appointment process will be completed by May 1st of each year. And then that this board and the superintendent will consult regularly with PCAC, but not less than quarterly. And that the board office, in cooperation with the superintendent's liaison, will develop and implement the application process. So those were basically all the I just went through and made a list of every single thing that we had changed in the policy. So that's where we are right now.
Okay, well, good. Well, over the 6 months that we've had this discussion, I'm very happy that you caught all of that in like 2 minutes. I also want to say, Mrs. Welsh, I know you mentioned that we had a public comment and we haven't updated the policy to that request. So I want to confirm that that was not included in this version of the policy.
It wasn't. In fact, it was actually I added language this go around that said that, because that was the request of the committee, that if in fact you wanted to do a second term, you had to submit an application. It wasn't automatically assumed you would do a second term.
Yeah, or apply, because it
Or
sounds
apply, yeah.
heavy and hard when you say you got to submit it, but just apply and, be considered with among others. So colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding policy 1500 to the full board with recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment. We amended the policy to remove. We amended the agenda to remove policy 0113 boundaries, attendance areas, policy 2570 closing school buildings, policy 5110.2 attendance, and policy 8391 boundary changes. So
basically, because we have the new policy, there's no reason to have all these other policies. Now, that new policy, I did share this with Cindy. The new policy doesn't go in effect till July 1, but these rescissions still have to go through all those steps with the board. So it should be wrapping up close to the end of the year. And then once the new policy goes in effect July 1, these all will be taken off the list of policies that exist.
Got it. Okay. So we're going to move to item 6.0, committee recommendations, new business governance. There are 4 items for new before I move forward, recognizing Ms. Adeline.
We need to take a vote to rescind the 4 policies.
Thank you for that. Okay. So colleagues, may I have a motion to forward the policies under items 5.4 through 5.7 to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment?
So moved.
Okay, and I second. It's been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh. I think you've already provided this, but to provide an overview of the policies under items 5.4 through 5.7.
5.7.
I think you may have already mentioned this, so if you.
Oh, yes, I just did. Yes, so basically it's just a matter of rescinding these policies, because what's current in our new policy, which is board policy 2569, geographic boundaries of attendance areas and consolidation / closure of schools, basically reflects much of the language in all 4. They themselves were redundant, and then on top of that, they would be duplicative to have those policies along with this new policy, and could actually be confusing for people. So that's why we're asking to have it rescinded.
All right, so colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding the policies under items 5.4 through 5.7 to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policies will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. So we now are going to move on to item 6.0, committee recommendations, new business and governance. There are 4 items for new business. We will also keep the 2.5-minute rule. So we're moving to item 6.1, policy 0105, parent, family, and community involvement. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward policy 0105, parent, family, and community involvement to the full board with a recommendation to be advanced as first reader?
So moved.
And I second. It's been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of public comments received from policy 0105.
So, I think we had two public comments. The one person who provided public comment, asked that, the policy be amended to encourage and prescribe more action by schools. And, I think wanted to have more specifics in terms of what the individual schools need to do. And there's a reference to, and I really don't know what this means, PEWs, P-E-W. Does anyone know what that is, what they're referencing to, P-E-W? What, they keep referencing the PEW protocols, which I just don't know what that means.
In what context? I might
Well,
know.
like they said, I'll read one part. While this policy acknowledges the family and community engagement as a shared responsibility, essential component for improving the academic outcomes of our students, PEWs protocols, as well as my experience with the staff and administration, fail to meet the essence of the policy and its cited standards. That I'm thinking they might be referencing a school, but I don't know. I can't think of one of our schools that would be a PEW. Usually they end with ES, MS, HS. So they might just be referencing one of the school that they're attending. Anyway, one of the things, so the one question is about having more specificity, which in this instance, I would recommend that one of the things that when they are working on the administrative procedure that goes with the policy, that's where they could add more specificity to the policy in terms of, because the policy is pretty long. It does have a lot of language about how to interact appropriately with parents in different areas of, for like student achievement, and then including parents and decision-making in the school and that kind of thing. So certainly the AP could address those things. And then it says that the policy mandates that there should be at least one public meeting a year. And this particular person says that should mandate schools hold more than one public meeting. And then that it talks about the annual survey, that there should be an annual survey sent out for parents to measure the effectiveness of this policy. That school administrators, teachers, parents, and families should complete it, and then the results should be posted. And then and then that way you can gauge whether the policy is effective. And then it also talks about the policy should encourage schools to grant parents and guardians reasonable access to staff and opportunities to volunteer, participate in their child's classes, observe in classrooms, proactively interact with teachers, and that this person's saying there's times when they're restricted from doing that. And I do know we have a school visitors administrative procedure, and it does have definite guidelines on, like, for school visitations, because a parent can't just walk in and visit and sit in a classroom. There could be testing going on depending on what is going on, that day in the school. It could be disruptive to have parents coming in and visiting, just different factors. It certainly allows for it, but it's just that there are some criteria of when you can do school visitation. So I'm guessing that's what they're referencing. And then they talk about their experience has been that the school, this particular school doesn't necessarily consult with the teachers unless they're having problems with their child, that they have behavioral concerns. So that's personal to what's happening in that particular school. And then let's see, it says that policy states each school will regularly provide opportunities for parents, families, and staff to participate in meaningful dialogue and decision-making related to school level initiatives. But they have this particular person says they haven't been aware of any opportunity that the school provided them to participate in any initiatives or program, decision-making. And then there was another statement that someone provided that says there should be a set rules at the county level that determine outside involvement. Last year, I called the state school board about this issue. If my child is in that school and I complete all training, I should be able to support my child and the teacher. So again, I don't know if that's in reference to being like able to be in a classroom so many times in a year or something, you know, I don't know specifically what that person was addressing.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mrs. Welsh, I think before I pose the question to my colleagues, do you, based on the policy as it currently is written, does it address any of those concerns?
Well, I think so. The other thing is that if we're talking about implementation, I really think the administrative procedures should provide more of the detail that goes with it. And I'm sure you have, well, and some of these things now are actually new, like when they said about once a year, like to having a meeting and stuff. There's certain things I can remember adding that we did not have in the policy. So it is true that maybe some of the things the parent is seeing is also a result that doesn't exist in the policy. So the current policy, not the new policy. But I would suggest, because of the specificity of the recommendations, that they probably are things that should be considered for the administrative procedure.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding policy 0105 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader. We're gonna move on to item 6.2, policy 0117, information technology services, information security. Colleagues, policy 0117, information technology services, information security was sent for public comments. No public comments were received. May I have a motion to forward policy 0117 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as a first reader?
So moved.
And I second. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader. We're going to move on to item 6.3, bylaw 9250, legal counsel. Colleagues, bylaw 9250, legal counsel was sent for public comments. No public comments were received. May I have a motion to forward bylaw 9250 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader?
So moved.
Okay. And I second. It's moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader. Now I'm going to move on to item 6.4, policy 5116, appeals process of student transfer requests. Colleagues, policy 5116, appeals process for student transfer requests was sent for public comments. No public comments were received. May I have a motion to forward policy 5116 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader?
So moved.
Okay, and I second. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader. We're now going to move on to item 7.0, follow-ups and next steps. So follow-ups from previous meetings will be posted on board docs upon receipt. Item 7.2, next steps. The next Policy and Governance Committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 27th, 2024 at 5 p.m. This meeting will be virtual. Please check the PGCPS board webpage for more information. And we're going to move to closing remarks from the chair and adjournment. So item 8.1, closing remarks and adjournment. Thank you to everyone for a great meeting this evening in discussions around board policies. Colleagues, are there any additional business to bring before the committee this evening? Okay, hearing none. May I have a motion to adjourn the February 13th, 2024 Policy and Governance meeting?
So moved.
Okay, and I second. It's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the time is now 8:10 p.m. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Have a great evening, and I will see many of you at some point this week. Take care.
Have a good evening, everyone.
It's still recording.